If I could ask everyone to take their seats, please. It is 7 o'clock. We are in council chambers for a public planning meeting. Welcome. I have a statement that I read at the start of the meeting. Just before we get going, we've had a slight problem with the audio system, so I will try and get closer to the... Is this better? Okay, thank you. The repair guy is coming in tomorrow, which doesn't help us tonight. So, councillors, just speak close to the microphone, if you would, please. Just before I get going, once again, if you wish to speak with respect to the United Church application, which will be heard second, we would appreciate it if you just pop out to the hallway there and sign up. You can do that anytime before we hear the application or anytime during, actually, the presentation. That's just simply so, it's not an official record, it's simply so we can manage the process a little more effectively. We'll put it on the overhead, and then you'll know when your opportunity to speak is coming up. So we start the meeting with a public statement. Welcome to Aurora's public planning meeting. The purpose of this public meeting is to inform the public and to obtain public input regarding the proposed official plan amendments and zoning bylaw amendments. No decisions will be made on the applications tonight, either of the applications, no decisions. For each planning application that will be considered by council tonight, the following process will occur. Town planning staff will outline the purpose of the planning application which is being considered. The applicant will then be given an opportunity to make a presentation and address issues that have been raised in a staff report or public concerns which have already been filed. Following the presentations, members of the public will be invited to offer their comments or concerns respecting the proposal. We'd ask you to come up to the podium here to do that. And then after we've gone through that, we'll make a list of the questions, and either staff or the proponent will attempt to answer those questions. Once we've gone through the public, we close that portion of the meeting. I then open it up to members of council for any questions to the proponent. It should be noted that a comprehensive report will be prepared and presented to a future general committee meeting assessing the merits of the application before us and providing council with a recommendation for consideration. It's very important that the town receive the correct names and addresses of individuals having an interest in the planning applications. Therefore, if you plan to speak at council this evening, or if you wish to be notified of any further council or committee meetings concerning the applications being considered, you must complete one of the green interested party forms and give it to our committee secretary sitting at front. Linda, if you could just hold one up, please. So make sure you fill one of those out if you want to be kept informed. Under the Planning Act, the applicant or residents have the right to appeal any decision of council on a planning application to the Ontario Municipal Board. But you must verbally express any comments or concerns here tonight or submit any comments or concerns in writing to the town prior to council adopting an amendment. The Ontario Municipal Board may dismiss all or part of an appeal made in respect of an application. This public meeting is being audio and video recorded. Your name, address, comments, and any other personal information are being recorded according to the Municipal Act and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. This will help our clerk prepare accurate minutes and to create a record that is available to the general public, including the town's website. And just before I go to the clerk, I should go back and actually open the meeting, shouldn't I, Madam Clerk? Just to be official about this. So we are in council chambers for the public planning meeting. Council, may I please have a motion to adopt the agenda as been circulated by Legislative Services? Councillor Thompson, thank you. Councillor Tom, second. Comments or questions? All in favor? We're doing hand vote. Opposed? That is carried, Madam Clerk. Declarations of pecuniary interest, please. Seeing none, I've already read my statement. I will now go to the Deputy Clerk to confirm that notification to the public has occurred as required by the Planning Act. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Respecting item 1, application for official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, draft plan of subdivision, Dormer Hill, Inc., 14029 Yonge Street, part of Lot 72, Concession 1, file numbers OPA-2017-02, ZBA-2017-01, and SUB-2017-01, related file CDM-2017-01. On May 4th, 2017, a notice of public planning meeting was published in the Auroran and Aurora Banner newspapers and given by mail to all addressed property owners within a minimum of 120 meters of the subject lands. A notice of public planning meeting sign was also posted on the subject lands fronting Yonge Street. Respecting item 2, applications for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, Aurora United Church, 15186 Yonge Street, 55, 57, 57A Temperance Street, 12 Tyler, and 16 Tyler Street, a notice of public planning meeting was given to all interested parties. Public meeting notification has been provided in accordance with the Planning Act.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I will now ask the Director of Building and Planning Services to introduce the application. Mr. Ramuto.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item number one, as the clerk mentioned, are applications for official plan, zoning, and draft plan of subdivision. Our planner, Marty Rokas, will provide a brief overview. The applicant is here with their planning consultant, Evans Planning, and their planner, Mr. Layton, will also have a presentation with respect to their application. Just before Marty begins, and Marty will go through the applications in some detail, I just want to make it clear to council, as this is probably the 7th or 8th application that we have considered within the Yonge Street South secondary plan area, and the application before us is also for an official plan amendment, but as you'll hear, this application is complying with the density provisions of OPA 34. The reason for the amendment to the official plan are really to vary some of the two setbacks policies within the official plan, but it does comply with the density requirement of 2 units an acre. Marty?
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. This is actually 3 applications submitted by Dormer Hill, and it's for 14029 Yonge Street. They are applications for an official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision. The application is for a 27-unit draft plan of subdivision, and to go along with that is official plan and zoning bylaw amendments. As Mr. Ramuto mentioned, the density requirements are being met by this plan, but the setback requirements, one of them is from Yonge Street. That's from the buildings to the center line of Yonge Street. It's a requirement of 60 meters. And the proposal is to reduce that to 40 meters to the lot lines of the proposed lots. There's also a separation from any estate residential designation. In this case, the estate residential lots are to the south of the subject lands, and the reduction would be from 35 meters, which is the current requirement, to 20 meters in the proposed plan. There's also the block plan requirement is proposed to be waived for this application. Right now, the property is a rural zone under the Oak Ridges Moraine, and to implement the proposed plan, the rezoning would be to rezone the portion being developed to an R2 exception zone to permit the 27 detached dwelling units, and there would be site-specific provisions for all the performance standards, including lot area, frontage, front yard setback, interior and exterior side yards, lot coverage, and building height. The draft plan of subdivision at this point is basically a technical exercise. What it would do is create an M plan over the entire lands to allow the actual lots to be created by part lot control, and that would come in at some point in the future. And a site plan will be required in the future as well to sort out all the site plan details. The property is located on the east side of Yonge Street, just north of Hunter's Glen. That's the street to the south. And the part that's being developed is on the western part towards Yonge Street, the part that doesn't have all the trees on it. The applications will be reviewed for consistency with provincial policies and plans, the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan, town and regional official plans, and the zoning bylaw. The lands have 3 designations. The part that are proposed for development is the cluster residential designation, which does allow for development. The environmental protection area is the wooded area towards the rear of the site, and there's a part of it that has environmental function area that is also proposed to be out of the developed area. Clusters of residential development are permitted, and those clusters would be separated from each other and from surrounding development, hence the separations in the official plan, and leaving the rest of the property as open space. This is a map showing basically the cross-hatched part is the cluster residential designation. The vertical lines are, the horizontal lines are the environmental protection area, and the environmental function is that little squiggly blob in the middle of the site towards the south of the site. There's also a little bit of land just north of the subject lands that's in the cluster residential, and that little square there, along with the part in the red, is Block D, and because the subject lands is most of that block, that's why the block plan requirement is proposed to not apply for the site. As mentioned, the zoning right now is a rural Oak Ridges moraine zone, which does not allow for development. To bring that into conformity with the official plan and to implement the proposed plan, the rezoning is to have it as an R2 residential zone with 27 single detached residences. And this is a map showing the current zoning. So it might be a little tough to see on the screen, but this is the conceptual site plan that's been submitted. An actual site plan application will be submitted in the future. This is the concept. Yonge Street is on the left side of the drawing. The lots on Hunter's Glen are to the south on the bottom, and the access would be from Yonge Street. There's a private condo road that comes in from Yonge Street. There's one that goes north and the one that winds its way toward the back of the developed portion of the property. There will be 27 lots. There would be an open kind of that open space in the middle of the site. You can see the two circles. There's a butternut tree there, and that would form a central green space. And there's also the block towards Yonge Street, which shows that setback from Yonge Street, and the block on the south where there aren't any houses is a setback from the properties on Hunter's Glen. On the eastern portion of the site, that is the part that's wooded right now. That is the environmental protection area and the environmental function area, and that is proposed to be left in its natural state. And this shows how the condominium would be developed. You can see the 27 lots, and the rest of the property is the open space block and the roads. We've done a preliminary review of the site. Some of the comments include, we'll be looking at conformity with the Oak Ridges Moraine and the official plan. And some of the other comments that have been submitted, basically technical comments that will need to be looked at and we'll need to see more detail on, include flow rates for sanitary sewers. Traffic control plan will need to be included. There will need to be consideration for future trails. As I mentioned, there will be a trail along Yonge Street, and the Trails Master Plan also shows an east-west trail just north or along the property line, actually, of the subject lands. And a vegetation management and restoration will have to be looked at as well. To conclude, staff will continue to work with the applicant to finalize outstanding technical matters, and comments received here tonight, and a comprehensive report with recommendations and options will be presented at a future general committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marty. And now for the proponent, we have Adam Layton. Mr. Layton.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Adam Layton. I'm here for Evans Planning on behalf of the owners of 14029 Yonge Street, Dormer Hill, Inc. As Mr. Rokos mentioned, there are a number of applications tonight: an official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, plan of subdivision, and an associated plan of condominium. So I've prepared a brief slideshow. There's quite a bit of information that was just presented. I'll try and keep my comments brief. As you can see, the subject lands highlighted in red are within an area that is experiencing a great deal of development pressure or activity, highlighting the most immediate applications that are current with the city in orange. Here is a closer view of the site. As you can see, the eastern portion of the site is constrained by a woodlot. The a great deal of background homework was done on this property prior to submitting applications, which included walking the site with representatives of the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority in order to assess and determine the limits of the natural features on the property that formed the basis of the development plan, including a 10-meter buffer feature from the limits of the natural features, as well as identifying the butternut tree, which has also been subject of ongoing conversations with Ministry of Natural Resources, and the matter has been more or less resolved with that ministry. Since Mr. Rokos went through the land use designations and the zoning bylaw, I can skip over that. As was stated, the official plan amendment is largely to recognize some minor, to borrow the term, variances in the policies contained in the official plan. We are under density based on what is allowed in the cluster residential designation. We're proposing 27 lots, whereas 35 would otherwise be permitted on a property of this size. There is also the zoning bylaw amendment to recognize the site-specific provisions required to permit the development to proceed, as well as the associated plan of subdivision and plan of condominium, which are more or less land registry office technical procedures. I have a bit of a more colorful and legible plan version of the site plan for you here. It does show the scale of the open space that is being preserved on the property, which is more than half the site, about 4.62 hectares, is being preserved in its current state. The intent is that will be protected as part of a common element feature of the condominium. 27 homes are proposed, with frontages starting at 12.2 meters and going in excess of 15 meters and above. An even more detailed plan, which zooms up closer, shows some of the features and amenities that are being proposed. In terms of the setback from Yonge Street, which is shown at the left of your page, we have recognized that there will be trails along Yonge Street, and we are also proposing a intensive berm and landscaping feature along both the west property line and the south property line in order to maintain the rural character of the area, as well as to accommodate and to maintain the intent of the setback policies that we are varying. There are also a number, so here's an example of what the streetscape could look like or may look like from Yonge Street, incorporating the berm and landscaping. Obviously, we will update this with details of the trail system when the details of that are worked out. Moving along, the Dormer Hill itself has a great deal of experience in building homes and has implemented a great deal of sustainability measures on the site. The homes are to have a great deal of available upgrades to address Energy Star, smart home monitoring, rainwater collection, solar power. The site itself is going to utilize a treatment train approach towards stormwater management, including low-impact development systems, which actually will, based on our initial calculations, exceed the water balance requirements. Once again, we are looking to retain and protect over 4.5 acres of the woodlot, which is well over 50% of the property, and the general location of the site adjacent to existing transit and the trail connections will help promote alternative means of transport and getting around for residents, which hopefully will reduce congestion and the number of cars on the road. Finally, some proposed conceptual elevations show a variety of architecture, slanting a little more to the modern aspect. Obviously, these are just concepts at this point, but there would be a variety subject to the ultimate homeowner's sensibilities and tastes. I note there was a number of continuing points that were raised by Mr. Rokos, mostly technical in nature. It's my understanding some of them, such as the flow rates to the sanitary sewer connections, have already been resolved, or there's an understanding been reached with the town in order to resolve that, and we will be addressing the rest of the comments through further, more detailed resubmissions. And if there are any questions from council, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Layton. We'll go to members of the public first, and no doubt we'll get you back up.
Excellent. I'll just put it back to the air photo. So there.
So any members of the public who would like to speak to this particular application, we'll ask you to come up to the podium. Give us your name and your address, and you have 5 minutes. I'm at 1 minute. And there is it's 5 minutes, there is a chime at 4 minutes. You're on.
I guess we're live. Okay, my name is John Green. I live at 5 Fox Point in Aurora, and I live in the area where this proposed subdivision will be taking place. Looking at the description and some of the zoning changes, the only 2 things that really bother me, I guess, is the setback, the buffer zone between the rear of the proposed lots and the existing houses on the north side of Hunter's Glen. The plan calls right now for 35 meters, and the proposal is to reduce it to 20 meters. So there's a difference there of roughly, 45 plus feet, which is quite a distance. Now, I understand from the person that was presenting this particular subdivision said there will be a berm there and some trees. However, 45 feet is quite a distance. And the second concern is the height of the houses, where the plan is calling for a maximum height of 10 meters, and they're proposing 12 meters, which is 6 plus feet. So that's quite a height for those people that are looking northwards towards this new subdivision. They're the 2 concerns that I have, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Any other members of the public with respect to this application, please? Mr. Layton, I'll invite you back up to speak to those 2 issues, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to respond. With regard to the setback on the south property line, where we are proposing to reduce the 35-meter buffer to 20 meters, I'll go back to the air photo as it shows it best. The woodlot feature actually wraps around a great majority of the southern property line. In fact, it is only the first 2 dwellings along Hunter's Glen which would actually see the buffer be reduced. The rest of the proposed development, as you can see here, does have that woodlot space, which is to be preserved, wrap around it. It is while 20 meters is only for a small constrained portion of the site, the majority of it will provide the adequate required or in excess of the required setback as currently provided under the official plan. With regard to height, the current zoning bylaw does provide for a maximum height of 10 meters, and we are requesting a height of 12 meters. This is largely due to address some grading constraints on the site. As the site is located on the moraine, we are trying to refrain from altering much of the grading on the site, which may result in houses that you may have to walk up to, or certain other matters, which will be determined at a later stage in development. So we want the extra additional 2 meters is more of a tool to promote flexibility in terms of the design and ultimate grading of the property.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public on this application? If seeing none, I will close this portion of the public meeting for the first application. Mr. Layton, I will invite you to come back up, please, and I'll open up to members of council in respect questions to the presentation from the proponent. Please press your button for speaker. Councillor Maracas, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the proponent. I ask this of everyone that comes forward. If you could just explain to us how you feel, or how the developer feels, that this would better our community, better our town, for us to allow these amendments to go through.
Mr. Layton?
Through your worship to Councillor Marakis, we have prepared quite a thorough planning justification report for exactly this purpose. As you are aware, the great number of provincial policies, including the PPS and the Places to Grow plan, as well as the Town of Aurora official plan, speak towards making wise and efficient use of land, infrastructure, resources, promoting walkability and sustainability. And it's our belief that the site being located where it is, adjacent to public transit, helping to round out development of otherwise what could be considered underutilized properties within the built boundary, and preserving a great deal of woodlot space would help to promote the goals of both the province and the Town of Aurora.
Councillor?
Thank you. You mentioned that it's realistically only about a couple or a handful of lots that are going to be encroaching, or that need to change in the setback from 35 to 20 meters. I'm just wondering, is there any flexibility to move that and not basically have no need for that change in the setback?
Mr. Layton?
With regard to the 20-meter setback from the south property line, it would impact, I guess if you're looking at the south side of the page, those first 3 lots right there along the condominium laneway. Obviously, there's a business decision by our client. Land costs being what they are, there's a certain give and take in terms of a number of units required to make a project feasible. I would also point out this: there is a precedent for this setback. It was approved in a adjacent development, I believe. I'm not sure what it's called these days, but it is located practically across the street. I believe maybe at the time it was called the Pandolfo subdivision, which does provide a precedent for a reduction from 35 meters to 20 meters. But notwithstanding that, we feel that, bearing in mind the landscape treatments that we are applying, the setback at 20 meters will still maintain the intent of the policy, which is to provide appropriate setback from the estate residential to the cluster residential. And we feel that the change from 35 meters to 20 still represents good planning.
Councillor?
Thank you. And you mentioned in your presentation that it's in your opinion, it's a minor variance change to go from the Oak Ridges Moraine Rural Zone to the new zoning you're looking to change to. So to me, that calling it a minor variance, I'm a little bit astounded at that, using that term, because under the rural zoning, you're only allowed 1 dwelling, and here we're moving to 27 dwellings. And so I'm just wondering, how is it that you consider that? Do you really consider that a minor variance?
Mr. Layton?
Through your worship to Councillor Marakis. No, I would not consider that a minor variance at all. That is hence why the submission of a zoning bylaw amendment. My reference to borrowing the phrase variance was with regard to the changes to the setbacks under the official plan amendment. Perhaps it was a poor choice of wording. The reference was intended to show that while the overall policy or framework of the official plan being the type of uses, the density, and the provisions for environmental protection and sustainability, walkability were being maintained, while some minor setbacks were being adjusted. So I apologize for the confusion.
Councillor?
Thank you. That's it for now. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following on Councillor Marakis' questions, we have, I don't know if you have a copy of our agenda for this evening, but we have on Schedule A, OPA 34, there is in the south central portion of this property an environmental function area. An environmental function area is very important for the Oak Ridges Moraine to the Oak Ridges Moraine. When I'm looking at your subdivision plan, I don't see that environmental function area. I see homes. Could you speak to that?
Mr. Layton, sir.
Through your worship to Councillor Gartner, I'd be happy to. The site was walked with the representatives of the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority and our client's consulting ecologist to determine the limits of the environmental features on the property. It's my understanding that the portion of the lands designated in environmental function are contained sort of within, is that a pointer? Within the, I guess, the area just south of the bulb. I believe it is located roughly in this area here, if that helps clarify. There's always a bit of an issue when it comes to interpreting official plan schedules and finding, or there can be some trouble determining the exact limits of official plan designations sometimes when they do not follow property lines. But our intent is to preserve all the environmental features as identified by the Conservation Authority on the property. With regard to the plan of subdivision, to clarify, that has been submitted as a one-block plan of subdivision as a technical matter. That's part of the land registry process to create the single-family lots. The intent is that all of the laneway, woodlot, open space, area around the butternut tree is to be protected, and the environmental protection zoning is to be applied to that portion of the property, and it is to be retained as a common element of the condominium.
Councillor?
Thank you. Well, we disagree on the area of the environmental function area. I see it reaching into the subdivision. We don't have an overlay, so it's very hard to see, but I think it's more extensive, and I think that your homes are on top of some of it for sure. Thank you.
Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking at your chart on page 6 of the report, where it lists most of the comparisons to a parent R2 zone. When we speak of parent R2 zone, perhaps my director will answer this, but if you could, in the estate homes that are 2 per acre, they are not a parent R2 zone. This speaks more to cluster residential. Yes, okay. The height maximum, you said, because it's the grading, some of them will have to be 12 meters. Do you have a rough idea how many of the homes, or would it just be all of the homes?
Mr. Layton?
Through your worship to Councillor Abel, we don't have that level of detail yet. It may be some of them, it may not be any of them, in which case we may reduce that number down. But the intent is to provide flexibility under the zoning bylaw to avoid having to go back for minor variances, which would result us coming back before council based on the new changes to the Planning Act, as you cannot vary a zoning bylaw for 2 years after its enactment anymore. So we generally apply a what we call a fudge factor into any zoning bylaw to allow for minor not in reference to the actual application, but to allow for some flexibility in terms of home siting and design. We typically do that with lot area, setbacks, heights as well. So.
Okay, so you really can't give a number or a percentage. Okay. But the idea was there'd be less cutting and filling on the moraine to accommodate some of that.
Question. Mr. Layton?
Through your worship, ideally we're trying to limit the amount of area of the property that is disturbed, so we would try to limit that. As well, it also might provide for a little more of a marketable product, allow for greater floor-to-ceiling heights in the buildings themselves. So.
That you could answer this, but the open space, of course, would be enjoyed by the public.
Mr. Layton?
I believe that is a detail that we would have to work out with the planning department. Our understanding right now is that it's to remain in private ownership. and under the care and maintenance of the Condominium Corporation.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Layton. Most of my questions around setbacks and the separation have been answered, except for just in terms of the southern separation, especially where it encroaches upon Lot 14. Can you just sort of speak in more detail, and this conceptual site plan sort of speaks to it, about what additional measures you'll take to mitigate some of the concerns over privacy? I heard a berm, I heard some screening, but perhaps you can sort of expand on that to ensure that those that are south of the properties will still enjoy their same level of privacy.
Mr. Layton.
Through your worship to Councillor Thompson, I'd be happy to. As you can see, this is probably a better slide to demonstrate this. As part of the low impact development measures that we're implementing on site, we're proposing a bioswale within this open space block along the south of the property. This would be intensively landscaped to help further, I guess, green the area, provide some trees that over time would grow to provide hopefully the same level of screening as any woodlot would, or hedgerow, I guess is a better descriptor, as well as the laneway is there as well to help provide further separation. And then finally, the flankage yards for each of lots 7, 8, and 17 would also be there to provide some further setback. Whatever fencing is erected by the ultimate homeowners would help deaden any noise. And generally, this being a low-density, single detached development, it's among the same. Well, the tenure is different. The use is compatible with it being low-density detached dwellings.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Any other speakers from council to the proponent? Thank you, Mr. Layton. We'll close this portion of the meeting. We'll go to the planning report, please. PBS 17-035, if someone put that on the floor. Councillor Kim. I'm sorry, Mr. Layton. There was a question. Councillor Kim. Got to be faster on the button.
Thank you, Mr. Layton, for coming back. Just so you have the last opportunity to make a change, the rural Oak Ridges Moraine Zone permits agricultural uses, breeding, raising, and training of farm animals. This is your last opportunity. Is there any consideration to breed and raise any farm animals in this land instead of the 27 units?
Mr. Layton?
I do not believe it's in my client's business plan to raise and breed farm animals as a continuing use on the property.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Layton. Would someone put the report on the floor, please? Councillor Thompson, thank you. Second. Councillor Perry. Speakers to the report, please. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to refer to some things in the report. On our page 7 under analysis, staff comments about preliminary review of the applications has been undertaken. Staff have identified the following matters to be addressed in greater detail before a final report is given to council. So I just would like you as a council to look at the bottom of page 7. So one of the matters to be addressed in greater detail is conformity to OPA 34 policies, including policies intended to respect and reinforce the existing physical character of the surrounding. Second one, conformity to the Oak Ridges Moraine conservation policies. Last one, environmental considerations. Again, we're back to the Oak Ridges Moraine and perhaps what a developer would like to do as opposed to what would be best for the environment. And as a council, there are so many things in the environment that we can't control. But this very important piece of land is in Aurora. And we do control what's going to happen to it. With respect to the rural zone and what's allowed, the 1 unit we have other land in Aurora that's zoned exactly the same way. And it's like that. I'm just going to read what I wrote. It's like that because the province has put together the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Act and plan, and the intent is to protect this area, and for certain parts of the moraine, the province is only allowing 1 unit. It's not out of thin air, it's there for the protection of the moraine. I think by allowing this, we're going completely against what not only is in the policy and the act, but what the intent of it was. This is our jurisdiction, our opportunity to protect. The other problems to me are precedent. If we allow this, we are going to have many more people in town coming to us and saying it's best case business for a developer. I don't like to hear that. That's not what we're here for, in my opinion. And with respect to the comments from the public, again, this is backing on estate residential. We've made everybody adhere to the setbacks from Yonge Street. If you look at the chart that says center line from Yonge Street, we have made everybody adhere to that. We've made everybody adhere, as far as I know, to the lot coverage, the buffer areas. So what are we doing here? Why would we do this for something that will help a developer but may hurt our community? Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. Through to Mr. Ramuno. Mr. Ramuno, when Mr. Layton was up, he made some references to the Pandolfo property and also said that in the past the town has made some concessions when it comes to separation as well as setbacks. I'm not familiar with it off the top of my head, but perhaps you could provide some background on council. Was this the case with the Pandolfo or other properties in the area?
Mr. Ramuno, please.
Yep. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I think the Pandolfo application across the street and perhaps even the Coots, a number of them in this area have requested variances or amendments to vary the setback from Yonge Street and to the estate residential adjacent estate residential areas by way of amendments to the official plan.
Councillor?
Thank you for the clarification. I think my only comment really when we go forward is that, for myself, I'm not as concerned with the setback from Yonge Street, but, I do want to make sure that some degree of privacy is maintained with regards to the separation between the development and the properties to the south. I know Mr. Layton pointed out a number of measures that they were looking to implement, but that would be my one comment. I'd want to see what we can do to best preserve that.
Councillor Perry, then Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's been a couple comments made about the zoning bylaw. For clarity's sake, through you to Mr. Ramuno, Marco, although it's true that the property is currently zoned rural residential, or sorry, rural open space. What's the term again?
Mr. Ramuno.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the existing zoning is rural Oak Ridges Moraine.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification on that. And through you to Mr. Ramuno, Marco, it's also true that a portion of the property is officially designated as cluster residential in the official plan, correct?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. Under the official plan, it does have a cluster residential designation.
Councillor.
And for clarity's sake, then, from your perspective as a planner, what happens when there is some level of conflict between the zoning bylaw and the official plan? Which one of these has precedent over the other?
Mr. Middle.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. In this case, the existing rural Oak Ridge Moraine zoning is the historical zoning. When we did do our Oak Ridge Moraine update, we provided that, that suffix. And the intent here is, by way of an application, the application is to rezone the property in keeping with the official plan cluster residential designation. And that's why we have a zoning bylaw amendment, because the existing zoning in this entire area still has the historic rural zone.
Councillor Perry.
So then, just to clarify, this is proceeding along the way that was always anticipated when we were going through this process, something that is Oak Ridge's Moraine rural. This is a level of control that we keep to make sure that we know what's going on for the development. Is that correct?
Mr. Middle.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. And as part of the zoning amendment application and the subdivision application, the applicant's required to submit all the various background studies to environmental work as well, to ensure conformity with the Oak Ridge's Moraine and determine the environmental features in keeping with the cluster residential designation within the OP.
Councillor Perry.
And last but not least, just to clarify, typically the official plan takes precedent over any zoning bylaw?
Mr. Middle.
Yes, well, to clarify, through you, Mr. Mayor, in this instance, because we have an official plan that's already identified designated lands, the zoning bylaw then is required to bring it in conformity to the official plan.
Councillor Perry.
That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. I'm not against the principle of development, and I, not even against the kind of conceptual layout for the site. One of the only delegate from the public mentioned the separation from the estate residential on the south. That's probably my biggest concern. I know Councillor Thompson mentioned it as well, but the applicants are also looking for a number of exceptions from the R2 zone. They're looking for a decrease in lot area, decrease in lot frontage, a decrease in front yard setbacks, a decrease in interior side yard setbacks, and in exterior side yard setbacks. They're also looking for an increase in lot coverage and an increase in height. So essentially they want to build bigger homes on smaller lots. And that concerns me as well, because as Councillor Gardner noted, and I appreciate her, enthusiasm for protection of the moraine, it's been consistent ever since I've known her. I feel like a way to mitigate that is having less built form. So if they complied with the parent R2 zone, or at least complied a bit closer to what the current stipulations are, coupled with perhaps farther setback from the estate residential, that's where I'd like to see this go. I'm not willing to hold it up at this point, so I'm comfortable moving forward to GC. However, I would like to see both the setback on the southern boundary and the setbacks that I just described addressed when it comes back to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tom. Councillor Abel, Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Young Street on our OPA, OP 34, does it allow for institutional closer to the road? And could I, through you, Mr. Mayor, ask for some clarification on that?
Mr. Middle.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the secondary plan does permit small-scale residential uses within the cluster residential designations.
I'm asking specifically about institutional forms.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, institutional development is permitted subject to rezoning within the cluster residential designation. Yes.
How and the height, how high can these be, and how far in from Young Street is it permissible?
Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the official plan, in my recollection, doesn't identify a height for those institutional uses or setbacks, but we have considered those type of proposals in the past, specifically on the west side. and in the Coots property, if council recalls, council did approve a institutional block to a maximum of 4-story height, but the OP doesn't identify a maximum height for institutional uses in the secondary plan. And Marty or Glenn, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe there's a height restriction for institutional.
Councillor?
We've gone through some of the uses for institutional, but just to simplify things, such as a medical office, along those lines, retirement, assisted retirement, and although we've approved a 4-story on the west side, and it has to be relatively close to Yonge, it can't be well in. We have not done so on the east side, but it is permissible that someone could put an application in on that east side. Is that correct?
Mr. Bruno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct. The OP would permit it.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. Councillor Marcus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One thing I like about this is that the density actually is under the 2 units per acre, which falls under our OPA 34. So I mean, it is definitely a nice change from what we see is everyone usually comes in with a higher density, and we struggle at the fact that it doesn't meet our OPA, and we try to argue and say you need to meet our 2 units per acre. So I'm happy about that, but I share a lot of the concerns, I mean, that we're hearing around the table. The setback to the southern estate lots, I think, needs to change. For me to move forward, that needs to change. I mean, I look at the picture and I see possibly 3 units could be removed, and you can have that setback easily put in there. The lot coverage is another one I think is important, and the height. So for me, I think that the proponent needs to go back, look at their business model, see what they can do, see if they can institute these changes. I'm also not opposed to moving forward to a general committee meeting. I think that they're hearing our concerns, and I think that they'll hopefully come back with those changes, and they'll make those minor changes, because I see them as minor changes that can be instituted and meet the needs that the town is asking for and that this council is asking for. So I'm not opposed to moving forward to the general committee meeting, and so I'll support the motion that's on the floor in front of us, as long as the understanding is that once this does come to general committee, if those changes aren't met, then I wouldn't be able to support the application at that time.
Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Mr. Layton put out a good case here, and his employer seemed to, compared to other developers that have come before us, their plan is reasonable. They seem flexible. I do share in a couple of concerns that the resident had, which is the buffer on the southwest corner. If we could have more flexibility in the buffer there, and also the setbacks from Yonge Street. And based on the cluster residential zoning in the past, we've had, as others have mentioned, more dense plans set before us. So this is very reasonable, given the provincial policy statement states that there should be, and they're promoting growth on main arteries such as Yonge. Oftentimes we hear, and much of the conversation these days is that our children can't afford housing. And there's a lot of complaints about that, but I think one of the reasons why that exists is because, we prevent the supply from coming online. And I do believe in conserving our environment and conserving our green space. There seems to be some representation that if you say Oak Ridge is a moraine, it's can't build on it, but there's various categories of Oak Ridge's moraine, and you can certainly build on this Oak Ridge's moraine category. I'm comfortable with the plan. I think they need to tinker with it a little bit in terms of the setback and the buffer on the south. Maybe as a suggestion, if they believe that if it would help, maybe, I'm not sure if Mr. Ramuno, how close they can get to go further east, but if it means that they can create a buffer to the south by going, 20 or 30 feet further east, I'm personally fine with that, but through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ramuno, is that how much further east can you go from the current boundaries?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Council Kim, I mean, the eastern portion of the site has a woodlot, so it is identified as an environmental protection area. So they are constrained there, and even within the commercial, or the cluster residential portion, a butternut through their environmental study was identified, and so they are protecting for that. And based on the housing form, that's why they are under the density provision of the 2 units an acre based on the housing types and the configuration of the developable area.
Councilor Kim?
So they've reached the furthest limit east then, okay. Yeah, I wasn't implying to build more, it's just, if you can conserve space in the south and you can go further the same distance, then I thought that might allow for some flexibility. So those are just a couple of recommendations that I have. If I'm happy to move this forward to general committee, if they can come back with something more flexible and amenable to the existing residents.
Thank you, Councilor Kim. Councilor Gartner for the second time.
Thank you. So with respect to what's just been said, so what we have are smaller units on smaller lots bordering estate residential. I'm not happy with that. Through you to Mr. Ramuno. Mr. Ramuno, when I spoke about that environmental feature that we have on page 11, the environmental function area, it's very hard to tell because we don't have overlays, but are there houses being built in that area?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So with respect to the designations, the environmental protection area identifies the more significant environmental features. The environmental restoration area or resource area identifies more, or moderate environmental features. An official plan does allow for, subject to environmental detailed work, for encroachment into the environmental function area. If they can demonstrate it isn't a significant feature. It does look, just based on the scale here, that there may be some slight encroachment into that function area, but that's something that we'll have to truth out with respect to once we complete our review of the environmental work that the applicant has submitted. Again, along with all the other Oak Ridge's marine conformity exercises. So there are two designations here. The environmental protection area, which contains the woodlot, is is untouched. The environmental function area is an area where the OP does allow, through the detailed study on site, some encroachment based on the science of the area.
Councilor?
Thank you. And going back to the chart on page 6, with respect to the lot area, if we enforce the parent R2 zone and didn't allow the exception zone, using this lot area of 460 square meters, how many homes would be allowed?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We haven't done that exercise. I mean, just one thing to keep in mind, this is pretty typical. Within this area, we do identify the parent R2 zone because that is the closest zone that we have in our current zoning bylaw. So what we are essentially doing is we are, tailoring the zoning within this secondary plan area to that parent 2. So it is typical that, as we've seen in the various applications that have come before council, that there are exceptions to the existing R2 zone. Keeping in mind that the cluster residential designation of OPA 34 does permit for that clustering and actually does permit for smaller unit sizes and actual townhouse units. So just to keep in mind. But it is something we'll take a look at and work with the applicant to see if there are any changes that can be made to some of those standards, specifically height. But in honesty, the lot area and even the coverage is something that we routinely see in this area that we need to customize that, because again, the parent R2 zone is an older zone that dates back to the 70s, and based on the cluster residential, it is a different build form, and the tenure in most cases in this area has been condominium type ownership.
Councillor?
Thank you. And just following on that, because it borders on state residential, I do think that there were comments around the table about the buffer between those two certainly should be maintained.
Councillor Marcus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Ramuno. Mr. Ramuno, you just said something just kind of caught my attention. And Mr. Chair, if I go stray a little off topic, if you don't mind allowing me some latitude, I'd appreciate it. You mentioned that the parent R2 zoning dates back to the 70s. I'm just wondering, through our comprehensive zoning bylaw review, have we corrected this issue?
Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's something that not yet. We are working on that, trying to harmonize some of our zones and updating those various zones, including the R2. But again, it won't deal with these type of situations specifically in this area because of the cluster residential type of development and the condominium type ownership.
Councillor Marcus?
That's it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councillor Humphries?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I apologize to everyone. I had a memorial to go to this evening, and I apologize I missed the comments from the residents. But just in line with the comments from the table, I am a little bit concerned with the buffer between the estate residential existing today. I think that we really need to look at that, and the height absolutely needs to be considered as well. So I think, as Councilor Marcus mentioned, it's nice to see a plan that conforms to the densification that we like to see. But if those, as they've heard around the table, would look into considering those alterations to what the best they can do, it'd be great to see a plan come forward that we can all support around the table. So that's all for me. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Humphries. If there's no further comments, I will call for the vote. And we're doing hand voting. All in favor of the proposal that's on the screen? Contrary? That motion carries. That finishes item 1. Thank you to the proponents and to the residents for coming out for that item. We have councillors escaping. What's that all about? Well, if I give you a 3-minute break, that means you'll be back in 5? Yeah. It's a bit like herding cats, getting people back together, that's all. Motion for a quick recess then. Councillor Marcus, Councillor Gartner. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. I'll remind everybody in the audience who is here for the Aurora United Church, if you wish to speak, we would ask that you just sign the sheet that's out in the lobby, just again to help us. And we also have hearing devices. If anybody's having trouble hearing, we do have a couple of hearing devices. We're back. First of all, Council, may I have a motion to resume, please? Councillors Kim and Peary, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. So we do understand that there's an issue with the microphone system. And I know you can't hear me. So we are, if everybody's really quiet. Councillors, speaking to the microphone, just get a little bit closer. How are we back there? Good? Okay. So we will, and like I said, the repairman's coming in tomorrow. So we could do this tomorrow night if you'd like instead. So we'll get underway. Now, we're not going to have a presentation from staff on the Aurora United Church because nothing in terms of a staff level has changed in terms of what Mr. Letman would normally present. So we're just going to move directly to the proponent. I don't know, Sarah, Bob, I'm not sure who it is.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. It will be both myself and Bob Murphy speaking tonight. So, Mayor, members of council, Mr. Ramuno, Mr. Letman, it's my privilege to be here again tonight to talk to you about the applications for the Aurora United Church and southbound development. I would like to say before I dive into the presentation that from our perspective, there's been a substantial amount of work since we were last here in March. So it will take roughly 15 minutes to run through the updates to the plans. I just, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like the opportunity to take that time. Great. Just a quick overview. As many know in the room, the existing uses on the church land include the vacant church property, existing at-grade parking with access from Yonge Street, which totals 24 spaces, and 5 residential homes, all of which are currently vacant. And just to jog everyone's memory, when we were here in March, the original development proposal was for a 2-story brand new United Church structure with associated community rooms, a 9-story, 159-unit retirement home with associated amenity spaces, 133 parking spaces, including 1 full level of underground for the retirement use, with parking areas at grade and subgrade for the church's use. We also provided substantial pedestrian realm improvements along Yonge Street and enhanced streetscaping, new street trees along Tyler and Temperance Streets. The development applications required for this property, there are 3 that have currently been applied or are in process. One's an official plan amendment, the other's a zoning bylaw amendment, and the other is Heritage Committee approval. In future, we still need to go through the site plan control approval process, as well as a consent application due to the land lease back to the church. Application milestones. I just wanted to take a quick minute to run everybody through where we're at in the process. For everyone's benefit, the applications were submitted back in December, deemed complete January 6th. As many in the room know, the first community meeting was held March 22nd. Since that time, you can see there's a few line items there. We've all been very busy trying to work with staff and work with the community to come back tonight with a plan that we're excited about and people are hopefully happy with. The Heritage Committee meeting happened April 10th. We also held a special Ratepayers Association meeting on April 26th. We came back to General Committee for approval of the Heritage recommendation on May 2nd. That then went to Council on May 9th. The project team also then hosted an additional community open house to talk the community through some of the updates to the plans on May 11th. And we're here tonight on May 24th. Now, key issues raised through the consultation. I thought it was really important for us to lay out what we've heard because there's a lot of people that have been involved in this application and I think I speak on behalf of the project team, representatives of the church and Southbound that it's really important to us that you know that we've heard you and we're listening. The first and major issue was the overall height of the proposed retirement home. People felt it was too high. Second, overall massing of the retirement home was also too much. Step backs of the retirement building along Temperance weren't significant enough. The stairwell towers on either end of the retirement home are overbearing. Vehicle access off of Yonge Street is not functional along a collector or regional transit route. The existing surface parking lot on Yonge Street limits the ability to provide an active streetscape in line with promenade policies. Materiality and commercial appearance of the buildings needs to be revised to reflect a more residential character. And overall, the amount of glazing, glass, proposed was considered a hazard to wildlife. We heard that at the last meeting, and also not in character with the neighborhood. We heard all of those things. So as a project team, we sat around the table and talked about how best we could address those. Tonight, I'd like to walk you through those changes. On May 8th, 2017, we submitted a set of revised plans to town staff. Those revised plans form the basis for the staff report that you see in the agenda tonight. The major changes there, for everyone in this room, those were also the plans that were presented at the additional community open house on May 11th. For those that were there, you'll know what they are. For those that weren't, I'm about to walk you through the changes. Those plans showed a reduction in height on the retirement home from 9 stories down to 7 stories. It was a reduction in the total number of retirement units from 159 suites to 152, removal of the existing Yonge Street driveway access, and the surface parking lot. Addition of new program social space at grade along Yonge Street to provide the active street frontage. Additional parking on the site, which increased the total number of spaces to 192. And a change to materiality of the retirement building to again get back to the comments on residential character. That included a reduction in the amount of glazing to improve compatibility, an increase in the amount of brick facade on the retirement building to address concerns again with compatibility and the residential character, and consistency in architectural finishes and the color palette around the retirement building in response to the peer review and design comments. Now, subsequent to that submission, over the last couple weeks since the May 11th open house, the project team has again gone back to the design table based on feedback that we heard from residents. And here tonight, the architect will walk you through the most current edition of the plans. Those include further adjustments to terracing of the building on the 5th, 6th, and 7th level along Temperance Street. The measurements on the screen there are measured from the lot line on Temperance, and they reflect, again, the 5th, 6th, and 7th level on the building. You'll see both a north end and a south end measurement. As Bob will explain, and it will be easier with a perspective, the building itself angles from the street, so the offset from the lot line changes. A change in brick color palette to provide visual vertical breaks in the massing. Removal of projecting balconies at the 5th and 6th level along Temperance to continue the building line back from the street. And a further reduction of the floor plate at the 5th level on the northwest corner to reduce the building envelope on the northern boundary by 1.8 meters. I'd like to hand it over to Bob Murphy to walk you through the plans.
How do I advance? Okay. Thank you very much. Can everyone in the back hear me? That's great. I know it's been a bit difficult back there. Sarah, as usual, has stolen most of my thunder. It's hard to keep a surprise when she's told you what we've been up to, but we have been very, very busy. We came, we listened, we learned, and I believe we responded to the concerns of council, staff, and the neighborhood. What I'd like to do is try and put some imagery to the statistics and words that Sarah has shared with you in doing sort of a before and after view. In each of these slides, we have the original submission on the left and our current submission on the right. This is the view down Mosley Street. I hope it's apparent to you just how extensively we have reduced the height of the retirement home. Does that work? A pointer? Great. Thank you. So these are really the same image, just immediately side by side. If you can sort of mentally draw a line across, you can see that we've taken 2 full stories out of the 8th and 9th story are no longer with us. In the view looking south on Yonge Street, again, a significant reduction in height. Something which is less obvious in this view is that we have eliminated the surface parking that used to be accessible from Yonge Street, and in its place, we're proposing about 9,000 feet of general purpose commercial retail. We don't have a use for this space right now, but it is no longer parking in keeping with recommendations made so far. We've also eliminated a false wall feature, which was a comment by the design review panel. It's now a real wall panel and encloses additional residential space at the second and third floor in the northeast corner. This is the view from the north end of Temperance. Looking south, I think you'll see a striking difference in the height reduction between our first submission and our second. Not only are 2 stories missing, but we have remodeled and changed the materials on the stair towers to articulate them a bit more and to make it less overbearing. In our current view, which is the one in the lower left corner, we've made even a few more recent modifications. Specifically, we've removed projecting balconies that were facing Temperance Street at the 5th floor level. We've also removed some balconies at the very northwest corner, again, keeping that image at this, or keeping the eye line as trim as we can at the top floor. This is an expanded view. You'll notice the balconies are gone. There's a balcony gone here. The 6th floor has been pushed back about 6 feet further than it was in our last scheme. The materiality has been changed significantly to give the appearance more of a streetscape of buildings rather than one monolithic building, which was the image before. This is the view from Temperance Street looking north. Unfortunately, the tree masks most of the view from this corner, but hopefully you can see again the drop in height from the 9th floor down to the 7th floor and the further improvements by the removal of the protruding balconies. And here you can see how we have pushed back the mass of the building away from the street to feature a 1 and 2 story portion closest to the street, bringing the scale down, but still keeping about a 9-foot setback from the street line in order to have room for street trees, plantings, and a very nice pedestrian realm down Tyler and up Temperance. This is the view looking east on Tyler towards Yonge Street in the background. Again, our first submission, 2 stories down to our second submission, big change in the materiality, and finally, our third, pushing that 6th floor back, removing the projecting balconies. So we think that these techniques, I guess, combine to really alter the scale and appearance of the building. Looking north on Yonge Street, you can see in the original submission, the 8th and 9th floor of the retirement home were visible above the church. That's no longer the case. Those stories are gone, and the retirement home is virtually screened entirely by the church. This view just highlights the location of the existing homes on Temperance and Tyler in comparison to our proposed setback. So here we have the house at 16 Tyler. What we don't show here is the covered porch, which extends closer to Tyler Street. There's a shed in the back, which is closer to Temperance. There's a porch and steps here, which brings this house virtually to the lot line. Similar, there's porch and steps here. So we really do believe that the 1 and 2 story portion of our building, which is set back about 9 feet from Temperance Street, is a significant improvement over the existing condition. Sarah's already mentioned the various setback dimensions. I won't go through those, but they are detailed on this drawing and in your report. Just in summary, we've brought the retirement home building down by 2 stories, eliminating the 9th and the 8th floor. The massing has been broken up by the use of increased and varied setbacks, an increase in the amount of brick and stone from levels 1 to 5, and glazing at levels 6 and 7 with a strong cornice line at the 5th floor. The building at grade has been visually divided through the use of awnings and window bays to create distinct segments along Temperance Street and to give the feeling of a streetscape of individual buildings rather than one large mass. The 2.7 meter setback at grade will be retained to allow for the planting of a new row of street trees. Step backs of the retirement home have been increased where we could to pull back the 6th floor a further 6 feet to keep within the spirit of the angular planes, to minimize the view plane at the street. We've deleted those projecting balconies at the 5th floor to provide a clean building face. The stairwell towers at either end cannot be moved, unfortunately, due to building code requirements for retirement homes, but we have made them shorter by 2 stories, and we've articulated the tops to reduce the mass. Vehicle access off Yonge Street has now been removed, and in its place, we have a floor area that can be used for a variety of commercial or retail spaces, which is more in keeping with the ambition of the promenade plan. The surface parking that's been on Yonge Street for many, many years is no longer there. We are proposing a second level of parking under our entire site to accommodate for the lost parking spaces. The materiality has really been changed. We've spent a lot of time and attention on the details to bring down the overall amount of glass to provide something which is not going to be a hazard to wildlife. I was sympathetic to the comments before about bird strikes, and I reiterate, City of Toronto has very strict guidelines about the use of bird-friendly glass, and we will be using that as appropriately and as required. And I turn it over for your questions.
Thank you very much, Bob and Sarah. Appreciate that. Okay, we'll now go to the public. Madam Clerk, the list. Bob, you can sit you doon. All right, so we have, this is just so you can see your name coming up, so you can, so you don't have to rush the microphone. So first of all, we have Reverend Lorraine and Reverend Andrew Komar. So I will just explain the process. You have 5 minutes. There will be a beep at the 4-minute mark, advising you have 1 minute left, and then at 5 minutes, we will be asking you to wrap up. This is for everybody. In public planning meetings, although we would encourage you not to, you can come back as often as you wish. But what we want to do is we want to at least go through a number of people. We'll try and capture all the questions as appropriate, and then we'll bring the proponent back up to answer as many of the questions, or staff, as possible. So is everybody fairly clear on that? And is everybody can hear okay for the most part? Okay. Lorraine and Andy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Mayor Daw, councillors, thank you for this opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Reverend Lorraine Newton Komar. I, along with my ministry partner, Reverend Andrew Komar, are privileged to serve the congregation of Aurora United Church. We are speaking this evening representing our 637 congregational members, as well as the hundreds of children, youth, and adults who have had programming and events associated with our building, such as Beavers, Cubs, Scouts, Venturers, and Guides, along with a number of recovery groups and community groups, and to highlight the many reasons why our church and seniors residence projects will add deeply to the town of Aurora. Aurora United Church has had a church building at the corner of Yonge and Tyler Streets for 199 years. We were a church before Aurora was a town. We were a congregation before Canada was a country. Over these many years, our church has welcomed thousands of children and adults in baptism, We've married thousands of Auroran citizens. We have offered care, comfort, and services of worship in times of bereavement, and opened our doors to the community in a number of outreach-related projects, including our weekly Rise and Shine community breakfast, which is open to anyone in need of food, support, and friendship. 2 of our houses were rented to Loft Crosslinks Housing and Support Services, providing housing for people with mental health challenges and who may be homeless or at risk of becoming homeless.
Together with Aurora Cornerstone, the campus, Our Lady of Grace, St. Andrew's Presbyterian, and Trinity Anglican churches, we serve Aurora through Welcoming Arms. Each church provides financial and volunteer support to Welcoming Arms, a ministry which assists low-income and marginalized residents living in our community. Welcoming Arms programs include Bridging the Gap, Christmas Assistance, the Auroran Christmas Dream Dinner, Community Garden Program, Martha's Table Community Luncheon Program held at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church, the Welcome Table Dinner Program held at Trinity Anglican Church, an income tax preparation program, and a back-to-school program. When we lost our church to the fire in April of 2014, very soon afterwards we began to look to the future, realizing the opportunity to broaden our scope in relation to the town of Aurora. In the midst of a discernment process, 2 years ago, we held a community roundtable at the Cultural Center, inviting community stakeholders to come to advise us and to help us envision that future. Mayor Daw was with us that day, as was Chris Ballard, MPP for Newmarket Aurora. Included also were representatives for food security, housing, schools, emergency services, mental health services, policing, local businesses, and colleagues from local churches, among others. At that time, it was made clear to us that along with transit and food security, there was a pressing need for housing. And this particular need appealed to us in our discernment process as we spoke of housing for seniors and wondered then how we might further fulfill that part of our mission or purpose. Because we were already providing nonprofit housing for seniors in the 28-unit Oakville complex in Oak Ridges, the proposed offer from Southbound Developments to do housing for seniors appealed to us as it met our mission for outreach goals, and so we have pursued that partnership.
Communities of faith have experienced a tremendous change in recent years, necessitating new and different ways of thinking about how we do ministry. And what is emerging is the notion that the church that is completely open to the community in which it exists, inviting involvement not just for worship or to provide marriages, funerals, and such, but access for a wide range of community groups looking for affordable space, is the church that will continue to have life. A big part of our AUC mission as a congregation has always been to reach out beyond ourselves, and to that point, our AUC congregation does not wish to be seen as set apart or as other. We are citizens of Aurora, and we are well aware of the role that we have played in the care and the upholding of community members. I'm just a few seconds left. We came to be associated, of course, with the EDGE program of the National Church and with Southbound.
If I could ask you to wrap up, and you can come back later if you'd like some more.
I could go really quick.
Be really quick, please.
Yes.
Because everybody else gets really quick, and then it gets really long.
This will astound you. Please, okay. The project with Southbound, of course, will help us to sustain our congregation financially for the future, as it will provide added funds for us to continue offering new forms of outreach while supporting the future life of our congregation. Loving our neighbor as ourselves lies at the core of our faith expression. Uniting hearts and hands on the journey has been our mission statement in these days of transition, and we've endeavored to keep this principle before us as we have ventured to renew our faith community. It is important to us to be good neighbors, involved, outward-reaching, caring neighbors. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Mr. Hoyer.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, ladies and gentlemen, My name is Hans Hoyer. I live at 28 Tyler Street. We are all for the rebuilding of the United Church, and we are for the inclusion of seniors housing in the project. This must be done in the spirit of the guidelines of the Promenade Plan and in the spirit of good neighborly conduct. Brian North was quoted in the Auroran. From day one, we have met with the Aurora Village Ratepayers Association, and this is the second meeting. We have welcomed them to come and look at what we are trying to do and achieve. That sounds like we had been informed about the plans right from the beginning. Not so. The plans were revealed to us on March 22, 2017. We met on April 26 to provide our candid feedback. But we know now that there were plans submitted by Bay Bridge Developments as early as December 2015 calling for a 9-story building. Bay Bridge Senior Housing had just acquired Amica. Bay Bridge, in turn, is owned by the Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan, which has assets of about $175 billion. Aurora teachers, active and retired, should know how a pension plan is messing up the town of Aurora plans for a downtown compatible with its heritage. Had we been informed from day one, we would have had a lot more time to gather information, but it was the strategy from the outset to keep everything as closely guarded as possible so that approvals would be obtained without too much input from the public. Taking advantage of the 28-meter height of the institutional zoning is an audacious move and does not square with completely ethical conduct. We can be 100% certain that all the lands housing churches were assigned institutional zoning when zoning was introduced in the 1950s or 1960s. And we can also say with 99.9% certainty that some existing building had a height of around 90 feet, which was later converted to 28 meters with the introduction of the metric system. Marco Ramuno said that the height has been codified since 1978, but did not know how it came about. How credible is that? During the meeting of April 26, 2017, Jeff Baum of Succession Development told the Ratepayers Group that there was an as-of right for a building height of 28 meters. Never mind that no building of such height has ever been built in Aurora other than churches. Never mind that there are minimum setback requirements and maximum lot coverage. Never mind that only the land on which the original church stood, or 46% of the total area, has the coveted institutional zoning. The other 54% has the C2 zoning. The right of 28-meter height comes with conditions all conveniently ignored by the church and the developer. In our opinion, it should be feasible to scale down the project to be respectful of the Promenade Plan, respectful in terms of height and mass, respectful of the need to have proper transitioning to the neighborhood and its heritage character. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyer.
Thank you.
Ms. Doust.
Okay.
Hi. Good evening. My name is Angela Doust, and I live at 31 Tyler Street here in Aurora. I am also president of the Aurora Village Ratepayers Association. My husband and I moved here over 20 years ago to raise a family because Aurora was a quiet, safe, small town with excellent schools and was within easy commuting distance to Toronto. We bought a dilapidated old Victorian house because the properties in this area were large and the neighborhood charming with a collection of 1.5 to 2-story Victorian homes. There is a beautiful creek running alongside of our property and large mature trees. When we inquired about restrictions on our property with regard to rebuilds or renovations, we were told that there were strict guidelines and planning bylaws pertaining to our house because it was listed by the town as historically important. We were not allowed to tear down our house, and any renovations that were to be done would have to be reviewed and approved by the Historical Board, the local Architectural Conservation Committee, and the Building Department. We were also subject to the laws outlined by Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority due to our proximity to the stream. We were also told that we would not be able to change the zoning on our property. We dutifully jumped through all of the hoops presented to us from the various regulatory bodies, paid the thousands of dollars in permit fees, and waited the months and months that it took to get all the permits so that we could begin renovations. The cost of the renovation was roughly double what it would have been had we just bulldozed the house and started anew. The result was worth it, however, as we now enjoy a beautifully restored Victorian home that perfectly fits into the surrounding neighborhood. We accomplished this without tearing down a heritage home, without exceptions to the planning bylaw, without changing the zoning, without reductions in setbacks, without increasing the height beyond what was allowed, and without upsetting the neighbors. On the contrary, the neighbors were ecstatic that the house was brought back from the brink of collapse. The town of Aurora, Historical Board, and LACAC were pleased that a piece of architectural history in the town had been saved. Fast forward 21 years. The United Church and Amica are proposing a church rebuild and retirement residence at the corner of Tyler and Yonge. They are asking for numerous exceptions to the planning bylaw, including setbacks, height, and zoning changes. The revised plan being presented here tonight, which although it has been reduced by 2 stories at Yonge Street, does nothing to address the massing and height problems at Tyler and Tempton Street or the buffer zone. They are tearing down also 5 listed heritage homes. Why is it that over 20 years ago, my husband and I were held to such a strict set of laws with regard to renovating our home, and yet somehow a large developer can come here and fly in the face of planning bylaws, promenade plans, and heritage designations to shoehorn in a mammoth structure for the sake of profit? There seems to be 2 sets of rules here, one for the homeowner and the other, more lenient set of rules for the developer. Myself and the rest of the Ratepayers Association are supportive of the church rebuild. However, it is a shame that the church chose to partner with a company that only looks at the bottom line and not the needs of the community around it. Churches are supposed to improve the communities around them, not destroy their character and ruin the enjoyment of homes by the people who live here. To all the members of council, this is your chance to make the right decision and hold this and future developers to the vision you have for Aurora. Don't let the developers dictate what this town becomes, which, if they had their way, will be another North York. And just as a side note, also, with the previous application tonight, council showed great concern about buffering zones to adjacent residential homes. I hope council will show as much concern about the lack of buffer zone between the Church Amica development and our residential houses. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Dowse. If I could keep the applause to a minimum, please. Mr. Howry.
We, the Aurora Village ratepayers, are not currently in support of the revised plans for the development of the Amica 7-story retirement tower, but are supportive of the need to rebuild the Aurora Church. The developer continues to claim that they have to break the bylaws in order to achieve enough profit to make the project viable. Well, if they cannot reduce the number of units to this site, as they say that is too restrictive due to the size, then this project would be better suited in another location. It simply does not fit our historic community. As we have said in many times over the past 2 weeks, our foremost concern for the development plans lie in the massing, tiering, setbacks of the retirement tower as it relates to the corner of Tyler and Temperance Streets, not just Temperance. I refer you to the diagram to the right that I've put on the overhead. I'm going to skip because they've done some minor changes. I tried to show on this that there's some blue. Well, first off, the red is the outline that I explained the other night of the original plan. You can see that outline, the profile of that elevation is the same as it was before. With the little bit of setbacks that they've increased tonight, I've sketched that onto that with the blue line just inside the red profile. It's actually required that within the town bylaws that going from the corner of the front of the third floor, you're supposed to hit a 45 and then reduce and set back from that line continuously. I've shown that. I've given a set of jagged lines that are black that show what we are requesting as the step back. The yellow part of that elevation shows you what should be removed in order to meet what is currently required by the bylaws. The same thing needs to happen to Temperance. So we can't just leave Temperance alone. There are people, including Cindy Jewett, who lives right across the street from this and will have a 7-story tower right in front of her. So this is just not acceptable. The second thing I want to point out is that the developer seems to be cherry picking between the town planning bylaws and the future promenade bylaws. We attempt to clarify this with town planning last week and wish to point out that Sarah Miller from FOTAN and Mark Romano from Aurora Town Planning have provided conflicting information to the ratepayers. So I highlight within that quote, I'll send this to all of you in town council, but in our email from Sarah, she has said that our application is asking to amend zoning on the properties to bring it in line with the proposed PD1 zone provisions and to allow for the height of the site up to 28 meters. Firstly, we already have discovered that they do not have the right to 28 meters without an additional amendment that's been asked for. And secondly, this is in conflict with when we asked specifically from Mark, town planning was asked in an email on May 20th, is planning holding Amica and the United Church to the current bylaws or to the future promenade plan? They should not be able to pick and choose from what is beneficial for their plans. What bylaws and policies are developed, is this developer being held to? And what we were told was to clarify, the United Church has applied for amendments to the town's official plan, which I believe is the current plan and not the future promenade plan, and the zoning bylaws to permit the increased height over what is currently allowed on the property. Lastly, there is talk by members of council that the 28-meter height restriction of the current institutional zoning law be grandfathered in for the United Church lands, which is where the original church stood. If this grandfathering was to be granted, it comes with very strict setback requirements, which the current redesigned plans do not fit into. Council must grandfather in these requirements as well, or the AUC should be granted the new institutional zoning, which has a maximum of 15 meters, where they still benefit because they have the exception for these restricted steeple heights. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Howery. Mr. Cabianca.
Good evening, councillors and mayor. My name is David Cabianca, and I live at 34 Tyler Street. This is the 4th time that I've stood before council to speak about the Amica development. I hope that this has not gone unnoted by council, that while I've made a number of presentations, until today, there's never been a delegate presentation by a resident that has advocated on behalf of this massive development. If this development is so good for Aurora, why then, since March 22, has no resident stood before council and advocated on its behalf? If the Amica development is such a positive addition to the town of Aurora, why has no ratepayers group been established to advocate in favor of this massive building? I'm part of a group of people who have presented facts to council, engaged with the community, and disseminated information about why we don't agree with the way zoning and heights have been manipulated. This advocacy I've participated in of the past few months has brought together a community of like-minded residents who live in this area, who will remember the decisions of council, who will be reminded of the decisions of council. We live in Aurora and we vote. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hanna?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. My name is David Hanna. I'm an Aurora resident. My history in this matter has been extensive because I joined a committee to manage the rental properties. So I'm going to speak this evening simply about those rental properties. I thought it would have been redundant for me to speak since the council has already made decisions about the historical nature of the houses, but there still seems to be some concerns with the Village Ratepayers Association. Ms. Dowse, I quote, saying 5 listed heritage homes on the site. The homes have been empty since last September, and prior to that, for the 2.5 years, they were maintained by a group of volunteers to keep up their maintenance and keep them in livable condition. And that was almost, it was definitely a thankless task, but it was definitely a Herculean task to keep them in livable condition. 2 of the houses, 57 and 57A, were built in the 1930s. They're not historically significant in any way, and one of those 2, 57A, is actually a garage. It's a 1-story with a loft above it. Actually, the garage was built in the 30s. The main house, 57, was built in the 1950s. In September of last year, I had the privilege of touring the Ontario Historical Society through all 5 properties, all 5 houses. And that group included an architect from Ontario Historical Society and an engineer, as well as a historian. And of the 5 houses, there was only one that they felt had any significant, interesting aspects to the house. As I said, 55, 57 and 57A are absolutely not historically significant in any way. So there may possibly have been 2 houses that were historically significant. 12 Tyler is an 1870s home that should have been torn down about 15 years ago if the town had been vigilant about construction. They would have looked at that very carefully, because we had to reconstruct the entire basement with supports to hold the house up. The house is rotting, has dry rot from within. We pulled off some outside siding on that day in September with the engineer, and they were aghast at what was underneath the siding. So they had found no significant interest in 12 Tyler. 16 Tyler, there was some interest. And there were 3 parts of it, 3 parts of that home that they felt was very interesting. There was one window, one stained glass window. And that window, we decided at that point in time, should be pulled from the house and put into use either in the church or in some other building significant to the town. The mantelpiece inside the living room is a beautiful piece of wood. And there are several other pieces of wood in the house that were significant to this Ontario Historical Society. No other parts of that home had any historical value. None. So I just want to allay the fears or concerns of the neighbors that we're tearing down 5 historically significant homes, because they are not significant. And I know for sure, personally, the shape that they're in and the millions of dollars that would have to be spent to do what Ms. Doust probably did for $150,000 21 years ago. But that's not possible today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hanna. Next up, Mr. Jeff Gordon. Mr. Gordon?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, good evening. Jeff Gordon. I live at 46 Mill Street, and my wife and I, we just moved back to Aurora in September of last year. We came from Toronto and Mississauga, where we'd lived for 25 years, and I grew up a couple of streets over in Old Aurora Village, and I can't say how happy we are to be back in Aurora. It's it's nice to just get away from the density and the chaos of what Mississauga has certainly turned into. And we very specifically chose to live in Old Aurora Village because of the charm and character. And I'm not opposed to development on the church site at all. I think that it just needs to be considered in terms of density, traffic flows and whatnot. That would be my concern. At 46 Mill, where we live, we're 2 doors down from the Chartwell retirement residence. And I have, I'm home working out of the house in an office, and I see what goes on in terms of the activity level of traffic patterns and whatnot, and it is significant. So that needs to be considered for sure in the decisions, I think, when considering these amendments to the bylaws and height restrictions. The last thing that I'm a little concerned about, which again I'd like to see developed, is the old tannery property, the 7-acre site that sits there. But my concern is that in conjunction with the 2 developments, we're going to have an awful lot of traffic on Mill, Tyler, Temperance, which concerns me and should be considered for sure. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Bill Newman. Mr. Newman, sir.
Mayor Daw and members of council, good evening. My name is Bill Newman. I reside at 35 Tribling Crescent here in Aurora. I have lived in this town since 1982 and have been a congregant of Aurora United Church since 1984. On the occasion of Aurora United's 150th anniversary celebrations in 1968, the following account was written, and I quote, "This church, standing as it has and does on the corner of Yonge and Tyler Streets, has seen Aurora grow from a small, struggling settlement in the woods to a busy town of 10,000 people. It has seen Yonge Street traffic change from the cart and horse and buggy stages to streetcar and finally automobile, bus, and heavy truck travel. Many generations of families have worshiped at its altar, served it during their lifetime, and being carried from it in death. It is a watchtower, guarding the spiritual well-being not only of the present generation, but we hope of generations yet unborn." End quote. 49 years later, and on the verge of its 200th anniversary at Yonge and Tyler, Aurora United Church is aspiring, through its proposed redevelopment, to continue its stewardship to a growing and changing community. Aurora United, in addition to being a place of worship for its congregants, has been and will continue to be a community gathering place for a range of faith, youth, community service, and outreach groups, all of which have been enumerated by our ministers. But in order to serve current and future generations of Aurorans, the church must be placed on a sustainable financial footing for the long term. The challenge facing Aurora United is not dissimilar to the one facing the town itself, as it approaches ultimate build-out and considers how to finance future infrastructure and service needs as development charge revenues peak. For Aurora United, a church structure alone cannot produce sufficient financial reserves to support the congregation into the future. The partnership between Aurora United and Southbound Developments through the long-term land lease will provide an income stream to enable the church to sustain not only its current congregational and outreach programs, but also those for the generations yet unborn. Aurora United and Southbound Developments have made substantial changes to the proposal to meet the requirements of the town's applicable bylaws, plans, and policies, and likewise those of the region and the province. Young and Tyler is a much different place now than it was in 1968 and will be 50 years hence. Aurora United is committed to its watchtower role through the accommodation of Aurora's increasingly diverse social and cultural interests. I would urge you, as the stewards of the town's future and the wider community interest, to lend your support to this revised development proposal. 200 years at Young and Tyler, and our journey in faith and community continues. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Next up, Emil Simon. Mr. Simon.
Mr. Mayor and fellow councillors, my name is Emil Simon. I own a building at 41 Temperance Street, which is very close to the church. And in full disclosure, I'm a member of the Aurora United Church. Clearly, I'm a business guy and I'm supporting a development like this. There's a couple of things, though, I think the council should consider. And I've lived at, or had this building at 41 Temperance for about 16 years. And the building next to me, 45 Temperance, over the years, there's been a lot of water running under that building. There's actually a pipe, and you can see a lot of water flow. And I think part of the development here requires a lot of underground parking. That's really critical for this development to occur. And I think you should consider doing some kind of a study or have some engineering done to determine whether there's a water problem at certain levels, because it does get wet under there. And I think that's very critical. I think that's been an issue maybe at Edward Street Grill, that location as well. So one thing I would encourage is a study for the water underneath the building for parking. The second one is a traffic study. There is going to be a lot more cars coming in and out. And, you know, it'd be helpful to know, like during peak times, how that's going to work in the area. So I would require some kind of a traffic study. Also at 45 Temperance, the planning and people have approved prior some parking out front. There's actually 5 parking spots have been approved for a coffee shop next to where the church and the retirement building is going to be. And I was just concerned about how that's going to be in terms of safety. You know, when the cars back out of that parking, if the development is overhung too much, what that's going to look like for safety concerns. So if someone can take a look at that with regard to the coffee shop plan at 45 Temperance. But clearly the church, what Bill said is I'm 100% supportive of. You can't just run a church sometimes on the income from the church, and having a combination of retirement home, we do need a lot more facilities for seniors. So clearly that's needed. My only concerns are the logistics of this. It's not the need. We need a retirement. We need a new church. My concerns are the execution. So if you could consider that, it'd be great. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. Next up, Mavis Urquhart. Ms. Urquhart.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. My name is Mavis Urquhart, and I live at 48 Connaught Avenue on the east side of Yonge Street. I am here in support of the Aurora Villagers Ratepayers Association and Mr. Masong Song, who lives directly across from this development at 56 Temperance Street. I have lived in Aurora for over 30 years. My father grew up in Aurora, and my grandfather had a medical practice at 44 Victoria Street for over 40 years. So I think I have deep roots in the community, and I'm very proud of the character and heritage of this town. I was also a municipal planner for many years. I know that extensive planning study and urban design review has undertaken by experts for the town of Aurora to help develop a clear vision for this area, which I do not believe is reflected in the development proposal as proposed to date. Rather, what we see is advantage being taken of existing and dated zoning permissions afforded by the unfortunate loss of the Aurora United Church, which was truly an historic landmark. Having reviewed the documentation, I would request that the current applications for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment not be approved pending the following. First, reconsideration of the land use fit. Building massing and scale in the community context based upon the vision, policies, and design guidelines recommended in the Promenade Plan and adopted by Council. Given the divergence of opinions about these important issues, my suggestion is that a peer review be undertaken of the development by the firm that authored the Promenade Plan. Second, revisions being made to the building to transition down to the adjoining heritage properties so that the development is, quote, sensitive, unquote, to the existing surrounding residential uses. The impact to the existing residents' views and sunlight is minimized. And the nature of Temperance Street, which is identified as a heritage street, as well as Tyler Street, is preserved as contemplated in the Promenade Plan. The highest massing should be adjacent to Yonge Street, which is a major arterial road, with a 45-degree angular plane strictly applied to protect the surrounding neighborhood. Third, a comprehensive block plan is adopted to show the future relationship and coordination of this project with adjoining properties. This is warranted given the proposed significant changes to the intensity of the development and the introduction of 2 new major accesses from the local streets within this block. Fourth, submission of detailed plans showing the proposed streetscape and architectural design, including lighting, street trees, open spaces, residential treatments, and also showing how the site is going to operate, including traffic circulation, drop-off, snow storage, garbage pickup, deliveries, loading, and emergency services, all without disrupting the existing neighbors, at the same time as preserving the heritage nature of Temperance and Tyler Streets. Fifth, further and meaningful consultation with all residents takes place on these matters. While a public information session has been held, many community members cannot understand or visualize architectural schematics, elevations, perspectives, and relate to what will actually be built. I would suggest instead that a charrette be held, led by a design professional to truly work with the community. Finally, as I'm sure you know, successful infill development is one of the most challenging types of development, especially in an established heritage residential area. Therefore, any implementing zoning bylaw for this property is premature until these matters are fully resolved with the community input. Also, the bylaw should be site-specific to the development. In closing, we know that the United Church is eager to rebuild and benefit from the leasing arrangement with Amica. That is understandable. However, what is being considered here is a planning matter that requires thorough consideration of this project to ensure it represents good planning, fully meeting the intent of the town's vision and successfully integrating this project into one of Aurora's oldest established heritage neighborhoods. I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Urquhart. Tanya Pietrelli. Could you pronounce your last name for me when you get up, please?
It's Pietrangelo.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Good evening, council members, mayor. My name is Tanya Pietrangelo, and I live at 50 Tyler with my husband and 2 young children. I don't want to repeat the previous comments, so I will endeavor not to, but I do share the same sentiments as my fellow neighbors. The developer has not done enough to change the plans in a way that is satisfactory to our neighborhood, our charming community full of character, consisting mainly of small historic homes adjacent to this property. My home is 105 years old. I've just completed an extensive renovation to it that's cost over $350,000. Our homes will suffer if this development proceeds as is. My current house value will diminish. Who will pay for that difference? And I'm not the only one. How would you feel if a large 7-story building was going to be built right beside your house, or right in front of your front door, or just a few doors down from the house you wanted to call home for the next 60 years and invested all of your savings in? I've spoken with so many of our neighbors on Tyler, Temperance, George, Mosley, Mill, etc., and they all share the same sentiments as I do. This has nothing to do with the church or the church plan itself. We support the church in its endeavors to rebuild. But it's the proposed retirement building plan as is that's not good enough. It's obtrusive. It does not fit in. It doesn't add value to our residential community. The scaling on Tyler and Temperance is too big, too high. The setback on Tyler and Temperance is not good enough. The design plans that Bob presented obscure how grand and obtrusive this building will be, with very conveniently placed trees in the pictures. Trees and greenscaping are obviously a must, but that should not detract from the plan at hand, and it will not mask the reality of the size and the scale of the building once it is built. Do not accept this plan as is, please, please. The developer needs to set back the building more to be in line with our homes on Tyler. The developer needs to scale down the size of the building. In speaking with many of my neighbors, many told me that the building should really not be more than 3 stories high, in keeping with the size of pre-existing buildings in our neighborhood. Now, I understand that may not be feasible with the developer whom the church has partnered with, but at the very most, no more than 5 stories should be allowed, especially on Tyler and Temperance. Do what you will on Yonge Street. Over 200 of our neighbors signed a petition that voiced their concerns about the scale and size of the building and the issue of adequate parking and increased traffic. Please listen to your residents. How many neighbors I spoke with just this past weekend that feel already so defeated. They feel that the town doesn't care about them. How shameful when residents who pay their taxes and contribute to the community are made to feel this way. Listen to your residents and make the developer come back with a better plan that fits with our homes and our community. No more than 5 stories on Tyler, 5 stories on Temperance, and increased setbacks and tiering on these streets. Please and thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pietrangelo. Tony Misongsong. Mr. Misongsong?
Mayor, members of council. My name's Tony Misongsong. I'm not going to speak too much because all my friends, my partner, she did a wonderful job. She's the planner, I'm the engineer, so I'm not going to dispute against her. What she said is completely correct. We deal with planning matters all the time. Proper transitioning is important. Troy showed you an example of what we would like to see, the 5 stories. Stepping back from the 3, it's in your own bylaw. You step back from the front wall of the 3-story and you put 45 degrees back. And you stop at 5, at 18.5 meters, that's your maximum height, the current bylaw. Now, if you notice the Troy's drawing there was a little building on top of the building there was a church. I mean, you can move some of what you lost on transitioning to Yonge Street. Your promenade says transition from Yonge Street down. You're going the other way around. Temperance is much lower than Yonge Street. And then you're putting all that height on Temperance Street. I think if you just go with your 3 stories, step back at your proper angular angle, and then you add, if you have to, put some bonusing heights towards Yonge Street, if you really need to achieve that number of units and the number of beds that you need to do, move it over there. Okay, don't sacrifice the Temperance and Tyler Street. Somebody said about traffic. We're not going to go there yet, but site plan, when it comes later on, I'd like you to look at traffic very carefully. I live on Temperance Street. I'm right in front of that building. Sometimes trying to get out during busy morning or afternoon, I can't even get out of there because people shortcut. on Temperance Street. There was a talk about one-way street on the other side by church. I think you should do one-way on Temperance Street. I'm just making that. But then you have 192 spaces going to come out of this. And I think a lot of them are seniors or supporting seniors. You might see a few accidents there when they move in. There's also a good point about the gentleman on 41 Temperance Street about the water table. I deal with water table all the time, permit to take water. Somebody, Sarah, your group, you should look into that, okay? Later on, the water balance, like Simcoe Conservation Authority, because you're completely underground parking, you have no infiltration, so those are the things you got to deal with. But I suggest you look at transitioning. Guys, you're almost there. And I said to everybody that I'm part of the ratepayers group, but I'm also most affected. But it doesn't mean that, we're unreasonable here. I think if we all just try to work together, we're going to see your project go through. But you just have to listen to most of us. And I think we have some good suggestions today, and we can work it all out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Msong. I think our last speaker at this point is Mr. Brian Elliott. Mr. Elliott.
Mayor Dawes, members of council, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Brian Elliott, and unfortunately I don't have the privilege of living in Aurora. I live at 963 Lockwood Circle in Newmarket. My wife Penny and I moved to the area back in the early 90s, and unfortunately Newmarket was a little bit more affordable. I'm hoping if this retirement home comes into play down the road, we'll be able to afford the space there, and I'll enjoy your fine town. We were welcomed into the Aurora United Church back in the early 90s. We were impressed by the activities of the church. It was amazing the number of groups using the building and still are loyal to us. Scouts, guides, music groups, community theater, In From the Cold, AA, the Korean Church, many more. I like to call the church the angel of Yonge Street for all of the help and facilities that have been provided for many people for over almost 200 years. Well, of course, the building is gone, but our spirit continues to thrive. Today, we need your help to help us create a new home. We want to make the church and its facility a center for the community in addition to being our church home. To do this and ensure a legacy, we need the funds to make this happen. Unfortunately, even with our insurance settlement, we need help, and we sought out a quality development partner for a joint proposal where we retain the ownership of the land. Now, I ask you to contemplate, if this proposal doesn't succeed, what happens? Now, I'm by background a trained mathematician, and I take a very logical view of things, and I hope you'll bear with me as I share my thoughts on what could happen. There seems to be two alternatives. One is to move to a much less costly building and a site, perhaps outside of Aurora's boundaries. There's not a lot of affordable land in Aurora. For us, this is not what we want to happen. We are an urban church on Yonge Street, and we'd like to get back to our mission of helping people on Yonge Street. The second alternative is to merge with an existing church with existing facilities, possibly outside of Aurora's boundaries. Again, this is not what we want. The congregation is dedicated to Aurora, so we need a partnership with a fair return for our partner, and that requires the size demonstrated here. Why should you folks in Aurora care? Well, let me give you a few reasons that logic suggests. One is the loss of our building and the community resources that it provides means there are added pressure on the town to supply meeting rooms, concert space, boardrooms, all of which are planned for our new building. I suspect the demands will come from many residents of the town to provide these facilities and staffing, but at what cost to the town? The second point I make for the town is that this provides a quality retirement home space. Hopefully I can afford to get in there someday. We've all seen many of our friends leave because of high housing prices, and that's not good, the churn in population. It also provides good jobs. My third and final point for the town is that this helps you with the intensification targets of the province. Yonge Street is going to get much taller in the next few years to meet these requirements, and you only have to look north at Newmarket to see what's going on. Right now, Aurora United owns the land that this development sits on. If we are forced to sell this location, who knows what will happen to the property and its ownership. I suggest it could put the entire block into play. It would seem logical for a developer to want to extend the development all the way up to Wellington. This much larger tract and much larger scale building would be what the residents would face. And I think what we have is a reasonable alternative. Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I ask you to consider this proposal as a reasonable compromise and a fair and generous investment in Aurora's future. I ask you to consider this proposal and support the angel of Yonge Street rather than the density devil you don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Sarah, Bob, you have any comments? And I'm going to go to Mr. Muno with a few questions. Just one thing, though, I do want to comment on. There was a comment that no one has spoken publicly in favor of this development. This is only the second time that this matter has been in front of council with respect to council deliberation on the Aurora United Church. First public planning meeting, then this public planning meeting. And I think both sides have been represented rather well. Those who are in favor of the development and those who are not so much in favor of the development. So there has been indeed, I think, pretty good public participation so far. So I just want to make sure that that's cleared up. And I know other people have spoken at other times. So Sarah, I'll go to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to take a few minutes, if that's all right, to try and respond to the comments that were brought up from the residents, and to thank the residents again for your continued interest in this project and for being with us throughout this process as we continue to evolve the plan. So without taking, I know we're getting on in the night, so I will try and keep it fairly efficient. To start with Mr. Hoyer, there were comments there specifically related to the application's ability to meet the objectives of the official plan, in particular the Aurora Promenade Plan. Mr. Hoyer wasn't the only one that mentioned that. Ms. Urquhart also, obviously as a respected planner, I appreciate a peer's evaluation of the application. And did want to take a moment to highlight some of the policies in the official plan that I think really speak to why this development makes sense and how we are in fact achieving the objectives of the Aurora Promenade Plan. I should also add, I know that council and the town spent a tremendous amount of time pulling together the Aurora Promenade Concept Plan back in 2010. And I know that involved a lot of public consultation, so we do take that document very seriously, and we have referred to it numerous times in our planning rationale. From section 11 in the official plan, there's a quote here on the Aurora Promenade I'd just like to read out, that the Aurora Promenade represents both the foundation of Aurora's rich and proud history, as well as the definition of its potential future. Centered on the historic heart at the intersection of the town's two main streets, this area extends out to encompass a significant and unique part of this community that in many ways represents its very essence. It is expected that the Aurora Promenade will build on its assets to evolve into a vibrant place to live, shop, work, and play. It will be inviting to stroll or pause along its entire length, encouraging people to experience it on foot and on bicycle. I will say this application that we've brought forward addresses the objectives, particularly at grade, at making substantial contributions to the public realm on Yonge Street, on Tyler, and on Temperance. And while we recognize that the Temperance right-of-way is quite narrow, we've done a lot of work there to set the new proposed building back substantially more than what is currently there to accommodate an additional sidewalk on the eastern side, as well as an additional row of street trees. Again, both two very, very important streetscape elements. Looking at some of the general policies of the plan, the Aurora official plan also speaks to, under Section 6, providing a range and mix of housing, where the town aims to encourage a broad range of housing sizes, densities, designs, tenures, and price to meet the needs of current and future residents. That's Policy 6.1a. Policy 6.11 goes on and speaks specifically to housing for seniors, noting that council will support private housing developments designed to provide a variety of housing options for seniors, including small ownership dwellings, higher density condominium dwellings, and permit aging in place, while recognizing the town's inability to establish occupancy restrictions. And for those that have joined us through the process so far, the Succession Developments has taken the time to explain how this building actually functions internally, and really the model for the building is to allow for exactly that, aging in place. There are 3 distinct seniors neighborhoods proposed inside the building, from independent living to assisted living to memory care. And from an operational perspective, we really feel that this building, particularly at this location in the town's in the heart of the town of Aurora, on your main street, is a perfect fit with that policy. Further to that, under Policy 7.1, the official plan speaks to community facilities, and in particular, the town's objectives to ensure support for a full range of community services and facilities to meet the needs of its current and future residents. Not to repeat what others have mentioned here tonight, but I think the Aurora Church does an exceptional job acting as a broader community facility for the town of Aurora. Those are some of the policies. I could go on, but I do also recognize we're getting late in the evening. To Mr. Howry, his comments, there were a few comments there, and I can appreciate there's been a lot of discussion and confusion around what's been applied for, what's currently permitted as of right under the existing zoning, what's coming forward under the town's new comprehensive zoning bylaw. And, you know, I can appreciate for somebody, I mean, I've done a planning degree, and it took me a long time to weed through it myself. So, and you know, that's not to diminish anyone's confusion. It's there is a lot happening in the town at the moment, and I think it's reflective too of the fact that Aurora is changing, and in particular, the promenade is really starting to become what 5 years ago this council and this town were hoping that it would be. So. The existing zoning on the property is split zoned between institutional and central commercial 2. The application that we submitted was to amend the zoning on the property to be entirely institutional. That was based on the fact that the application was submitted under the existing zoning currently in place. With that in mind, we also need to recognize that the town itself is going through an update to your overall zoning bylaw. So we are working closely with staff to bring forward a zoning amendment that aligns with the Promenade Downtown 1 zone. And for those that have had a chance to really look through the Promenade Downtown 1, a lot of the provisions in there are really aligned with the C2 Central Commercial Zone. So to the comments from Troy that we're trying to cherry pick between zones, I really feel that's not accurately reflecting what we're trying to do here. What we're trying to do is move forward a zoning bylaw amendment application, which is an allowed application under the Planning Act at a time of transition in the town zoning bylaw. So I just wanted to clarify that. Also to Troy's comment that there were conflicting statements between myself and Mr. Ramuno. I don't have the privilege of having those up on the screen, but I can attest that those two statements are actually saying the same thing. To Mr. Cabianca, I won't go on. Mayor Daw, you also reiterated the March 22nd meeting. I believe there were approximately 50% that spoke in support of the application. To Mr. Simon, the comments there regarding engineering studies and traffic studies, we take to heart and obviously take very seriously. The original application had both submitted, both an engineering study that looked at water table, water balance, and ways to improve water management on the site, With these revisions and the addition of parking, we are currently updating and reviewing the engineering study and the traffic analysis for the property. Mr. Gordon also spoke to interest in seeing updates to the traffic study, and again, to attest, we have those underway. To Ms. Urquhart's comments I had mentioned a bit earlier, there was a comment there on with some interest in having a peer review from the planning group that completed the promenade plan. Her comment is actually well aligned with the town's objectives, and I can attest that the planning partnership is the consulting firm that completed that concept plan, and our application was peer reviewed by them through this process. So comments have come back through first circulation, and some of those comments also related to looking at ways to break up the mass vertically, and also to addressing height transitions. And we feel that the application amendments we've put forward are addressing some of those. Ms. Urquhart also suggested a charrette. I can't speak to it now, but you know, we're looking to move forward with the official plan amendment applications out of tonight, but there is still a site plan control application and other things coming forward. I would be happy to speak to my client about continued involvement with the community. Beyond that, I think Mr. Masong also spoke to angular plane. There's also been a lot of discussion between ourselves and town staff on the appropriate definition of angular plane. There are a number of different locations within the official plan and the streetscape guidelines for the promenade that outline different or somewhat conflicting positions to take the angular plane from. I can assure you, and perhaps I could bring it up, Linda, if I do have a revised elevation here that shows. Sorry, just the thank you question, or have I done something? All right, thank you. There we go. So we did take the time to review the various angular plane policies. There is the original application submitted looked at the angular plane definition as defined in the official plan. This plan here shows the revised elevations and outlines at a 9-meter height from the property line on the west side of Temperance, the 45-degree angle, and you can see that we are well within that 45-degree angular plane. I think that covers the majority of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Any further comments from any members of the public, please? Thank you, Sarah. Give us your name and address, sir.
Mr. Mayor, councillors, Mr. Maruno, my name is Brian North. I'm chair of the Rebuild Committee for the Aurora United Church, representing our congregation. I've tried very hard not to get up and speak. I've tried to leave it to our professionals, Sarah and Bob, but I think it was time now to stand up and speak on our behalf. We in the burning, and I'm sorry, I don't speak well off the cuff, but after the loss of our church, a missional group was put together, a committee that met with town staff, met with town organizations, and tried to figure out what is the best use of our property and the church. We went out to the town, we opened it up to the public to find out what the best use for the church was. In the end, in the missional statement, was to give back to the community. We were very fortunate to have Succession, who I have come to respect very much in this whole process. Jeff and Stephen, I've got to know their morals, their values, and they are the right partners for this. We originally were going to remove those houses. We acquired them over the years for various reasons, and originally we were looking at making a memory care facility across them. We didn't have enough property. We didn't plan on losing a church at the time either. Unfortunately, when we lost the church, it changed our plans. So now we're trying to give back to the community at the same time as building our church. There are a few things that I have to rebuttal, such as we did not speak to the public or the Ratepayers Association. We actually have. We did have to go to our congregation first and tell our congregation what our plans were. If they were to hear it through the papers before they heard it through us, what we were trying to achieve, that would have been very unfair to the congregation. We do represent the congregation. We have tried to meet with the Ratepayers Association. We have tried to meet their needs. We have listened. I've stood there while Jeff took it on the cuff and listened to what they said and came out of the meetings and said, let's come down the 2 floors. Originally, we wanted to come down 1. We wanted to push the issue. Not for any other reason, but we want to make this work for all of us. When he left the Ratepayers Association, he walked out and we stood in the street and he said, I want you to bring it down 2 floors. That was Jeff himself who said that to Bob. He did listen to the Ratepayers Association. We did meet with the Ratepayers Association, and to this day, even since submitting and speaking to you a couple of weeks ago, we've changed again to try and listen to the Ratepayers Association. I totally respect what they're trying to do. I respect them for where they're living. I respect them for their plans. But what we have to understand is we're along the Yonge Street corridor. I've been here for 34 years. I was married in the church 33 years ago. I better get that right because I'll get in trouble for that. 33 years ago. I've seen a lot of changes. My wife has been here all her life. Her parents moved here in the 50s. They've seen changes. There are going to be changes in our community. And I think this change is a change that needs to come. Not just for the church, but for the town. We've made this church available to the community. We do a lot of outreach. We put over almost 50,000 people through that church a year with the different organizations. We have great ministers who you've met tonight, those who haven't. We have great congregation here supporting us tonight, and I really hope that you will definitely look at this with open arms, open eyes, and pass this through. Thank you very much.
Again, I'll ask you to hold your applause. Mr. Howery? Again, I'll ask you to introduce yourself, and you have 5 minutes.
Hi, I'm Troy Howery, again, 34 Tyler. I know you're very passionate, Brian, and we are just as passionate about you coming back and it being built, and we just need to work together rather than, again, tonight, we were surprised with this minor change again. You know, I don't know why everything is a surprise with this particular project. I would like to point out again that I have asked both planning and the developer about this issue of institutional. If it is grandfathered in, institutional may, in the old plan, it allows for 28 meters. Why that is, we don't know, but there is no 28-meter building in Aurora. But if it is allowed, there are very strict setbacks that are requested by this bylaw. If they want to have this institutional standing, they have to apply that. This proposal would not fit into that. It is my recommendation that they deal with this as a PD1 project, keep the area of the church that was originally church, make it institutional. It gets its exemptions in the future bylaw, which is 15-meter maximum, and it gives them their tower, and it achieves everything. Again, the PD1 allows for the 5 floors, plus the bonusing based on the extra commercial work that they're doing or community work they're doing for the community. It would fit in that. This is what should be done. So I just want clarity on that because we've been asking the questions and not receiving answers. Secondly, again, we're cherry picking. If there are a number of angular planes inside of the plan that are conflicting with each other, why is it not in the better choice of the town to choose the one that makes it best for the ratepayers and the community around the building? I do not understand why you would choose the one that makes most benefit for you so that you're able to show that you're meeting the angles. It's just absurd. Thank you.
Mr. Cabianca, again, if you introduce yourself, and you have 5 minutes, sir.
David Cabianca, just have one response with regards to the numbers of meetings that have been held. It's true at the March 22nd meeting, it was about 50% in favor, 50% not in favor. But then I was present at when the report was received from the Heritage Committee for the delisting of the 5 buildings. And I was present the other day for the receiving of the report for the changing of the zoning bylaws. At those 2 meetings, I was present with Hans Hoyer, and on both those meetings, it was 100% not in favor of the development as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any others? If there's no other speakers from the public with respect to this planning item tonight, I will close this portion of the public planning meeting. I will go to council members who may have questions for the proponents. So I'll just ask one last time, any members of the public who would like to speak. Seeing none, Madam Clerk, I'll close this portion of the public planning meeting. I'll ask Bob and Sarah to come up to the podium, and I will open it up to council members. I've got Councilor Maracas up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the proponent, Sarah. We heard about the traffic issues, and I'm just wondering when you guys do look at the traffic studies, will it be looked at in combination with any future development that's going to be within the area? Because I also do feel that it's important that the traffic study should incorporate and look at an overview of the whole area instead of just this specific development. And is that going to happen, or is it just going to be looking strictly at this development?
Chair? Yeah, it will take into account surrounding developments, both existing or recently approved and proposed. I should also add that the town did go and have the application peer reviewed by a separate transportation firm. We have had those peer review comments as well. The peer review came back with similar findings to our own traffic consultant with respect to the surrounding traffic network.
Thank you, and through you to the proponent. We also hear about the transition into the neighborhood and the setbacks, and I know there's been some movement tonight from previous. Is there any flexibility to maneuver some more with the setbacks and the transitioning into the neighborhood?
Sir?
Through the chair. I'll speak on behalf of the proponent. We continue to be willing to work with the community. That being said, I feel we've sort of moved mountains to get to where we are tonight. I think there's obviously a particular program that needs to be achieved on the site in order to allow the retirement use to be developed from a feasibility perspective. I think where we've landed is, as somebody else has mentioned, a good compromise that respects the policies of the official plan and also meets the angular plane and the intent of step backs in the zoning bylaw. That being said, if there are particular movements, I know tiering above level, like in the 5, 6, and 7 area is the sensitive space. We're open to hearing specific feedback on that.
Councillor?
Thank you, and just one more question through you. The application from its original state has moved down 2 stories, but yet has only eliminated, I think it's 7 units. So I'm just wondering, how is it that you can eliminate 2 stories and only 7 units are eliminated? I would figure there would be more units eliminated if you're eliminating 2 stories. So maybe you can explain how that was achieved.
Decisions that had to be made in order to make that decision or to arrive at those results. 2 stories were eliminated, and a major switch was made in the program of the building. We lost 2 floors of large independent living units In order to keep the suite count where it needed to be, we had to shift the business plan to something with a heavier emphasis on assisted living and memory care, which are smaller studio suites. So we got rid of 2 floors of large suites and then converted lower floors to a higher density. We actually subtracted about 15% of the floor area of the retirement home. There was a corresponding increase in floor area for the project because we gained 9,000 square feet down on Yonge Street. What used to be parking lot is now available as some form of commercial retail. But we lost almost 20,000 square feet of space, gained 9, and lost 7 suites overall. So a lot of moving parts, but that's how it was achieved.
Councillor?
Thank you. That's all for now, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. Sarah, one of the residents that came forward spoke about water issues, and I know that council, in our conversations with regards to Library Square and the past history of when the library was built, also are aware of some water challenges in that area. Have you done some water studies? You know, can you put any sort of information for the residents?
Through the chair, I will refer to the architect on this one.
Tag team. Yes, we have done geological studies. We are aware of the high water table. We're also aware that the soil bearing pressures aren't particularly good. So we are planning a raft foundation. This is a similar condition to what the Centro Condominium ran into. The hospital up in Newmarket was built under a similar fashion. So we are aware of the issues.
Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mayor Daw, and thank you for coming back. I have 4 questions. It wasn't made apparent in the report. Typically, we have charts that describe, you know, if you're asking for an exception zone, you know, it kind of compares it to the current zone and so forth. So I just want to ask, in lieu of time, and if I've missed it, forgive me. The proposed site plan as it is in front of us, what would be the rear setback minimum of the building?
Sarah?
Through the chair. I wish it were a very simple answer. What we're dealing with on this property is what is currently 5 properties being rezoned as 1 property for zoning purposes. With that, we actually have 3 street frontages and therefore technically no rear yard. And I know Mr. Ramuno and Mr. Letman are sitting here if there are differing opinions, but there's technically no rear yard setback. So the ultimate development plan, our front yard will be on Yonge Street, but we are using a front yard interface on all 3, on Temperance and Yonge, and an exterior side yard interface on Temperance. Or Tyler, my apologies.
Councillor?
Thank you. So then, if you're using a front yard on Yonge, a front yard on Temperance, what would the minimum setback be then? That's what I'm asking.
Sarah?
Through the chair. The application on Yonge Street proposes bear with me, I'll just pull it up in the planning rationale. I believe it's 0.83 meters off of Yonge, and it proposes 2.75 meters on Temperance.
Councillor?
Thank you. And can you just quickly then give me the exterior side yard setback for Tyler and also the interior side yard setback for the adjacent property?
Through the chair, the exterior side yard setback proposed is 0.45 meters. Exterior. 45. And interior is 0. Now, I should just add there, I can pull up plan view. That's obviously the minimum dimension. The building on both of those frontages fluctuates.
Councillor?
Thank you very much for the answers to my questions.
Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ramuno.
Can I address it to Mr. Rumino, or is it strictly to Ms. Miller?
Ideally,
Okay.
if you have any questions for the proponent.
Okay.
Otherwise, we can. Is it to the report or to the presentation?
I'll hold my question till after.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys and Councillor Abel.
Through Mr. Mayor, and thank you, sir. Many of my questions have been answered. Just a comment that one of the residents made, the angle, opportunity, and I think I heard you say this, to move it forward towards Yonge Street, to, sort of to relieve the, is that Temperance, Tyler, more Temperance. Was there an opportunity to look at that further with the residents as well, in terms of, again, the resident who has homes right there, his concern is the overbearing building in front of his home? I'd like your thoughts on that, if there's any.
Sure. Through the chair. Councillor, we did spend a substantial amount of time as a project team looking at transitions on all road frontages, and we heard definitely that the residents' interest is to keep the mass and the bulk of the building towards Yonge Street and really shift the building face off of Temperance as much as possible. The proposal that we've put forward tonight really attempts to do that, and you can see it here in the elevation. Obviously, at the Temperance and Tyler location, we're at 1 story or 1.5 stories, giving grade change to try and reflect what 16 Tyler is currently sitting at, and then the building shifts its way up to the 7th story from Temperance. I know from an operational perspective and from building design, it's difficult to shift the mass too much more forward without getting into awkward internal design challenges with stairwells and elevators. Bob, if there's anything else to be added, you can jump in. But I know we did look at that. Also, to be said, we also know that the promenade policies, that there is an interest in really re-securing the Aurora United Church as a landmark building, and really defining that spire on the corner as again grounding the downtown promenade once again on that site. So we're conscious of how the Yonge Street interface relates to the spire, and we think 6 stories makes sense here.
I'm sorry, thank you, and I do appreciate all the changes that you've made going down 2 stories, and thank you for the explanation earlier that Councilor Maracus asked. How did you accomplish that? So sounds like great changes to go down those 2 stories, and I appreciate that attempt as well. Thanks. That's all for now.
Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the logic in granting exceptions to or amendments, in my mind, is that there'll be a benefit, and one of the benefits would be maintaining the heritage area, and I think most of the talk that you've heard has been preserving that Temperance Tyler. And we've seen the discussions and collaboration working to some degree. But there are key policies that this application supports. And so I think one of them is intensification. Could you say a couple more, and then I'm going to just ask a couple questions about that.
Sarah.
Sure, through the chair. Just referencing earlier to some of the policies I referenced earlier related to a mixture of housing under policy 6.1, relating to housing for seniors under 6.11, relating to the provision of new community facilities under 7.1, speaking specifically to the Aurora Promenade Secondary Plan. I will say the policy 11329 supports building lot coverage of up to 90% of the site area within the downtown, and a real interest in achieving a strong and solid street face, and particularly at grade, a very active frontage. These new proposed plans remove that Yonge Street access. They fill in the surface parking lot and provide additional potential new retail or communal use space. Those are straight out of your promenade policies.
Councillor Abel.
So for intensification in institutional, where it's not residential. So if for as far as intensification of accommodating housing or living for residents, you're not accommodating that because a lot of them are just suites, and it's a communal dining environment where one comes down, etc. So that's the difference between an institutional and, say, a residential. So as far as intensification, I'm having trouble understanding the key policy on that.
Sarah?
Go ahead, Sarah.
Chair, Councillor Abel, I think perhaps we could spend all evening talking about the division between institutional and residential uses when it comes to seniors living. There's been many a planner and many a planning report that debates how that use is best defined. In this particular case, the retirement home, yes, while it is a permitted use under the institutional zone, it is providing housing for seniors. It's just an alternative form of housing to what we would traditionally know. So while they are smaller suites with communal dining spaces and kitchens, it is still absolutely allowing for the housing of Aurora residents to age in place. Intensification objectives from a residential perspective.
So the outreach is to provide an affordable for our seniors, and we won't talk about it right now. But I understand that the Amica model is in $4,000 to $6,000 per month. So as opposed to a rental unit for residential, it might be $1,500, which would be sort of where I'm talking about intensification, and we could debate all day institutional and residential. So it's a key focus going forward, but it's about the model that we're building, and the massing that we're talking about, especially the back end towards Temperance. And I really appreciate what you've done on the streetscape to Yonge Street. I mean, we have this beautiful church that sits at the end of Moseley, which is really a termination point. It's so key in our heritage and what Aurora is. But it's the other part that we have. We're two sides of Yonge Street. And so the massing at the back is what you've heard loud and clear from the residents. The question is that with the model that the developer needs, he is unable to accommodate a smaller massing because it needs that many units. So we're basically at that critical point that you cannot move things because you have to satisfy the number of units, and that's key and central to you accommodating. If you only needed 118 units, you would have no problem accommodating what the residents are bringing forward. Is that a fair question?
Sarah?
Chair, I can't speak directly to the feasibility of this project, but I can say there is a threshold on the number of units to make it viable. And yes, we have accommodated to a point where we are really unable to budge on unit count in order to make the project work.
Councillor, hold on.
It's based on that parameter that you have to deal with, and you have to do that because that's who's hired you to put this together. This is the best that you can do.
Is that a question, Councillor?
No, that's a statement. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to Sarah. From a planning perspective, I definitely understand that it can be debated whether or not residential or institutional, but from a human life perspective, there will be people moving into our community, moving out of their homes in our community, staying in their community. There are very much people there, so regardless of what it's called, I think that's a big factor for me. I just want to state that I appreciate that you've made changes to try and accommodate the needs of the residents. Definitely understand where they're coming from, but I truly appreciate where you've been able to accommodate them and the work you and your team has put into accommodating them. So I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Any other comments or questions for the proponent? Seeing none, I'll close this portion of the meeting then, and we'll move to the report. If I could ask a member of council to please put the report on the floor. Councillor Thompson, thank you. Councillor Perry, second. Speakers to the report, please. Press your button. Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Rumino. You know, we've heard some residents finding it a challenge to, go through the planning maze in terms of the interpretation of 28 feet and maybe a couple of other items. I'm sure you've wrote notes down on that. Can you provide some clarity with respect to the 28 feet? I know you explained that at length during GC and council prior to tonight, but if you could provide some clarity.
Mr. Romero.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to the existing zoning permissions, Ms. Miller got it right. The property has a dual zoning. A portion has an institutional zoning, which permits a variety of institutional uses, and the zoning bylaw provides a maximum height limit of 28 meters. That is clear in our zoning bylaw. It's been there since the late 70s. And the towers and spirals are not factored into that height. They can go above and beyond that 28-meter height. There's no debate over that. The other portion of the property has a C2, or Central Commercial Zone, that's also been in place since the late 70s, and that permits a variety of commercial uses, institutional uses, residential, and the height permission in that zoning is 5 stories or 18.5 meters. The actual bylaw doesn't speak to meters, but it says 5 stories, and it speaks to proper massing and stepping back. The official plan designation for the entire site is within our promenade downtown, which permits maximum height of 5 stories and a variety of uses. The principle of development of those uses is already established in both the existing zoning and the official plan. The applicants have submitted amendments to the zoning bylaw and the official plan, as they are permitted to do, as permitted under legislation and our own official plan, to facilitate the development that they're proposing on their entire land holding, which includes the old church property and the properties along Temperance Street, to permit essentially the increase in height from the 5 stories on the C2 to what we see tonight, which is a 6/7-story building at a height of around 21.5 meters.
Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Rumino. So in a nutshell, if I'm probably a little bit technically going to be inaccurate here, but generally speaking, in the Yonge Street corridor, since the late 70s or thereabouts, there was a 28-meter allowance, but the more recent plan, which is the promenade plan, which supersedes the institutional along Yonge, it was 5 stories or 5+1, and so right now the United Church is applying for amendment on that 5-story because it's within the promenade area. Is that correct?
Mr. Miller?
To you, Mr. Mayor, yes. Again, to be clear, they've requested amendments to both the OP and zoning. Again, to consolidate the zoning, what they've requested for is just a consolidated institutional zone, because the church, place of worship, and the retirement center are really those type of uses that are permitted under that institutional definition. But again, their existing zoning permission as of right, again, as I mentioned, is the institutional in C2, which is the 28 meters and the 5 stories.
Councillor?
This is, since the get-go, this has been a very, emotional and taxing, experience. I'm sure it is for the residents. Your very lives are being impacted because the structure is going up directly in front of you, as well as United Church members, who've been looking to rebuild their home, or their church, their home, and obtaining the financial means to create the vision that they had planned. In terms of as a council, we try to be as objective as possible and look at the big picture and what is the best for the town of Aurora. I think in 2003 or 4, when the library was built, I think it's like 4 or 5 stories. I believe I wasn't here at that time, but most of the people that I've spoken with, even those who were against the library, said they were against the library. But I think almost unanimously, 15 years later or so, they are in agreement that it was the right move to make. In terms of the underground foundations, it has similar characteristics in terms of, they did the water studies and all that. So I just want to point that out, that when there's change, very few people like change, and change is rarely gradual. Coming from the financial world, if you look from the 1930s or even 1900s to currently, I think the equity markets gain about 7%. Wouldn't it be great to have predictable 7% without any risk, 7% year in, year out? But if you look at snapshots, 5-year, 10-year horizons, you see abrupt change. 20% increase. As we saw in 2008, you saw a almost 50% decrease. Scared the living crap out of her. Is that a swear word? It scared everybody. But from then on, you see the march higher and you see the change. And so I guess the point there is, whether it's in the financial markets, whether it's in your residential area, your school, there's change, and it's rarely gradual. And so these are the times when council, as well as the residents and the applicants, we all have to look long term. Is this the right thing for the town? I remember reading when I was researching this. Ryerson University came out with a report stating that we have sufficient. I don't agree with it necessarily on that portion. We have sufficient housing, but we don't have the right type of housing. We have people who are middle-aged or the baby boomers who want to stay in their neighborhoods, but they can't because they're all large, single, detached homes where they live, and they want to mature and live in their neighborhoods, but they cannot because they don't have the right housing type. And so most of the planning reports that I've seen and read indicates that you need to have some mixed use, even in terms of retirement homes. When there's, we've had, ratepayers associations and residents, approach us, and mainly because they don't like something that's going up their neighborhood. Rarely do people come here because they like something. If we had to decide based on local residents' opinions, we could have a patchwork in Aurora and throughout all the municipalities, frankly. And so, that's a thought that I have. Whether it be cell phone towers, we all use them, and we've used that illustration many times. We all like to use them, but we don't want them in our neighborhood. Just a couple seconds to mention one other thing.
You're coming close to your time limit, Councillor Kim.
Okay. And, I know the residents have said that it's not about the church, but, frankly, it is about the church, because this is about their vision, and this is the solution that they found. It's like saying, I'm going to criticize your sister, but not offend your brother or your parents. It's one entity. So I know we're trying to remove ourselves from the spiritual group, but in fact, they're all one entity. That said, I just want to close by saying that, I do support the recommendation. There's still time to make the changes. I think we got a lot closer. And, I do am respectful of the residents who are living there, because it is a big change, and it's it's a difficult situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Councillor, excuse me, please. Councillor Abel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I thank everyone's patience. It's a long evening. I can appreciate getting a bit restless. I was elected to represent the residents. The residents bring their concerns to us. We help them move through challenges and concerns that they have. I often say if I'll always support any application if the concerns of the residents are met. That's what tears with me. The developers know how to talk to staff, and we make decisions, but we have to make decisions based on what the residents are telling us. And it's loud and clear that the residents on Tyler and on Temperance and surrounding areas have an issue with the massing, specifically on the back part. I hear that loud and clear. There is a great relationship with the church and the developers southbound, I hope I got that right, or Succession, and they specialize in retirement homes, specifically aging as you move along, which is an independent into assisted into memory care. And I think most of us understand the importance of having that. And we have in our place in Aurora several places like that. If we have, and I had asked earlier in the application before, we have two zoned right now on Yonge Street, just south of us here. We also have a promenade, and we talked about the moraine, which is part of Aurora, and we also talk about our heritage district and our downtown core, which is a part of Aurora. And we have to weigh these decisions. I appreciate that it was a tremendous loss when we lost United Church. It really was, but often out of the ashes, so to speak, there's an opportunity. And now we can rebuild and we can put a sustainable, and the outreach that they provide can continue, and it can be in a model that sustains for many, many years. And this is a great model moving forward. It's a responsible model. And the call went out, and one such person came forward and to provide housing for senior residents. And I won't diminish the fact that it's a higher end. And I don't mean to say that it's unnecessary, but I'm just saying when United Church had those homes, they took the most vulnerable people and put them in there at their expense. They let the houses and properties go down, and now they can provide residents, seniors, to age with great dignity and with great humanitarian, and also be provided with money now instead of making that sacrifice. And that's a great model to go forward in sustainability. And I think most of us here, everyone in the audience, understand that. But there has to be some sort of balance, that when there's an opportunity, it has to benefit. And if there's a benefit, then we can move forward. And we have to see what that benefit is on Temperance and Tyler, to be clear. I can see the benefits on Yonge Street, and I can see the benefits that are provided. And the sustainable money that is provided to United Church, the benefits to our community are countless and so valuable. But we have to have that balance. If that development can't take place at these number of units, then the amount of money that they're collecting in that lease will not be forthcoming. It makes sense that if the units went down, the amount of money coming from that lease is going to go down. So there's a business aspect to this whole thing. And again, it's a bit of a balance. Could we defend our heritage? That's what our job is. Our heritage, our cultural precinct. We put in a notice of motion in December of 2015. This council approved that we go out and get a design and a conceptual plan of what the Temperance Street precinct would look like. It was a call out, it was a staff direction, and it hasn't been done. But had it been done in a timely manner, that could have been presented at the time to the partners coming forth. And they may have had a little more different approach on how they're handling and what we're doing. We're talking about the streetscape. I'm hopeful that we can get that message and we can get there, because we're almost there. We're almost there. I think it's loud and clear that the residents have said, we have no issue with this, but we would like to see a little more of that graduation going up. We allow for 5 stories, and we allow for in a commercial.
Time, please.
Then I'll wrap up, and I'll get another opportunity.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Humphreys.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And first of all, I want to thank all the ratepayers, residents, and the developer for coming and working through this. I know it's not easy. It's very, very difficult, and it is emotional because it's where we live. And I do believe the ratepayers' concerns were heard, and I believe that the developer has done a great job in going down. I wouldn't call those minor changes. I've been doing this for about 7 years now and planning meetings where we've asked developers to come down, and they actually are minor. Like, you know, it's astonishing sometimes. So tonight, with 2 stories coming down and the gradual incline of the impact towards temperance, truly is significant for me. I don't know how my peers feel, but I've seen planning meetings where they don't go quite this. It doesn't look like it going well for the residents, but it's a lot better than what I've seen in past. I do want to encourage the developer to continue to work with the residents, and I know they will because they've been open to that. And I do want the residents to continue to work, and let's try to be really work together as partners. I think throwing up sometimes misinformation, you know, we all get our backs up. So let's try to. It's where we live. And it's not easy because it's emotional, but if we can try to continue to work together, I know this is going to be an incredible development. And I really do pray that it will be a beautiful, on temperance in all areas of this structure that will be built. I do want to bring to mind, though, from my perspective, is the aging population. I think we heard recently that there are more people over the age of 65 now than under the age of 14. That's a crisis situation in Ontario. This is not a joke. We have to help our seniors. And this is the tip of the iceberg. This is the beginning of the baby boomers, the 65-year-olds, and we're just going to keep going and going and going. The cost of care, yes, it's expensive, but hopefully we're all planning for that. And it does include everything. So when you're not paying your mortgage or your bills, it's include full care. And that's what that's planning for the future. And a sustainable model. You know what's happening out there in places to worship. They're shutting down. And everyone wants a place to go, not everyone, but a lot of people like to go to a place where they feel like they can get support or help or pray or whatever, meditate in any type of environment. And this is a sustainable model. The world is changing, people are changing, and this development is trying to create a building that will be sustainable so that our community can use it. And I think that's a wonderful approach in the U.S. They've done this for the last 30 years or more. I've been really looking into this a lot. And a lot of times the community has a transition for members of the church or whatever the committee is, and you can gradually go into one of these homes if you're a member of the church, and you can plan and get on a waiting list and whatever. But it's a service that we can all use if we choose to. For me, I see that the developer has listened to change the facade. There's a lot more, very much more appealing facade based on what the residents have asked for. They want it to be more transitional in that. In the community, and I hear you. I am concerned a little bit about traffic. And I don't mean traffic for people who live there. It's more the in and out traffic for delivering food and, laundry services and all that kind of thing that goes with the servicing of seniors residents. So that's where I'm going to keep a close eye as we get to that point to see where those areas will be, where there'll be deliveries and so on. That to me is more concerning than actual traffic from the residents that live there. I believe it's in a perfect spot. It's right downtown where seniors can walk and see our downtown. It's going to be more vibrant. We want to densify that. That is 100% part of our prominent plan. We want to densify Yonge Street. We want to have people go there, live there, and use the facilities. Am I running close? I am. So really quick, just wanted to say that I would like and I do appreciate more work with the developer if they can on the diagonal transition on Temperance. I know you said you've done a lot of work, but anyway, I'll come back to that. Yep. Okay.
Thank you.
Boy, I talk a lot when I don't realize.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. First off, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who came out this evening. I think the feedback that everybody provides is essential, not just for us, but has led to some of the changes that we've seen to date. But, as we start off with every public planning meeting, we say that there are no decisions being made tonight. This is just one step in the process, and it's really to get everybody's feedback. So through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Ramuno. Mr. Ramuno, the recommendation tonight is to move to the next step, which is really a future GC meeting and to get a report from you, really providing more details on the application. And so I guess for the residents here and those interested, within your report, will you speak to how it conforms to the official plan, how it conforms to our urban design guidelines? Will you speak to some of the issues raised tonight with respect to traffic and water issues? Can you sort of perhaps elaborate on what that report will provide?
Mr. Ramuno, please.
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Councillor Thompson, that's correct. I mean, if Council directs me to come back with a recommendation report and options and a final report, I mean, that's what I'm charged with. I'll be responding to, all the concerns that we've heard. We'll address all the technical requirements that we need to review with respect to, we have planning applications and they've submitted a number of background technical studies, traffic, environmental, soils reports. So that will be part of our review and evaluation. And we'll also deal with how the applications conform or meet the vision of our official plan, because there is an amendment to increase the height to our promenade plan, as well as the zoning bylaw amendment change. So it'll be a comprehensive report outlining all the concerns that we've heard, how they've been addressed, and all the technical requirements, as well as an analysis of how it meets the intent of our official plan and other policies, as well as the provincial policies and growth plan.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. And through you again to Mr. Ramuno. Would it be fair to say that it may take some time to put this report together, and there's still opportunities for ongoing consultation and dialogue with both the residents as well as the developer and some of the issues that have been raised tonight?
Mr. Ramuno?
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Again, as with any planning process, we'll continue to receive any comments that we do get in from the residents or any stakeholders. We have been receiving comments, and so we can continue to receive those comments moving forward. We're here to try and address any questions that residents may have. We do get a lot of emails and try and address those when we can. But yes, the process is open right up until council makes a final decision on an application, typically based on a report that comes from my department.
Councillor?
I bring that up because whenever we have a planning application, we have I'll call it an obligation to render a verdict, either to accept it or reject it in a reasonable time frame. And to the best of my knowledge, official plan amendments, we have a 6-month time frame to render that decision, and zoning bylaws, it's either 90 or 120 days. Mr. Ramuno can clarify for us. So, I think that it's good to know that there's opportunities for ongoing dialogue, but there is a responsibility on our part to weigh in and either make this decision, either to accept it or reject it within that reasonable time frame. And since as we saw in an earlier slide presentation, the application was first submitted in the middle of December, I think that it is important for us to move forward, encourage ongoing dialogue to address some of the issues being brought forward tonight, but to bring forward that report from Mr. Ramuno and bring it to a next GC meeting. Mr. Ramuno, did I get the dates right? Perhaps you could confirm that?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, Councillor Thompson, you're correct. Under the Planning Act, Council has 6 months to provide make a decision on a official plan amendment and 4 months on a zoning bylaw amendment. The applications were submitted in mid-December 2016, so we've had the applications now for approximately 5 months.
Councillor?
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Marcus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd also like to start off saying I appreciate everyone coming out. I think we all realize that public planning is probably one of the most passionate times when everyone comes out and speaks their mind, and we all appreciate the comments that we hear from every single one of you. I think every single one of us feel that we are elected to represent all the residents of this town and the town as a whole. And when we look at planning and applications, we look at it from a high level view of what's good for the town as a whole. And when I look at this area, we've talked about this many times as a council, and this, I'd say, vision has been going on since 2010 when the Promenade Plan was developed, and it was to intensify the Yonge Street corridor. And so we have that vision where we want to incorporate that intensification into our town. We're looking at many things, the Library Square. We're looking at bringing people within this area. I look at this application and I see that. I see that that's what it's doing. It's also helping with the growing population of our seniors, which we're desperately going to need extra housing. And so I think that speaks to that, and that's what helps out with this. So I see that as a benefit. And for me, I've always stated that if there's not a benefit to the community as a whole, well then we don't move forward with an amendment. As I look forward, I see many benefits in this application. I see that the proponent, the developer, Aurora United Church, has listened to the concerns, have made substantial changes from what I've seen. They've dropped 2 floors. They've done some extra tiering. I'd like to see a little bit more tiering, but I agree. I think that when we get to that general committee meeting, we can still work on a few things, traffic study, and I think there's some things, but I do agree with everyone. I think everyone here does agree. We're close. We're very close. But I think that we need to keep moving forward, and we, as Councillor Thompson mentioned, we have an obligation to make a decision tonight. And while it's not a final decision, but we need to make a decision moving forward. But to my main point, that this meets what our vision is, to intensify within the downtown core. This brings in the Aurora United Church back in its rightful place in the heart of Aurora. And so I'm fully comfortable moving forward to the general committee meeting, and I'll support the motion in front of me tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Before I move to Councillor Tom, I need a motion to extend, please. Councillor Perry, Councillor Humphreys, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Councillor Tom.
Thank you, Mayor Daw. And again, like my fellow councillors, thanks to everyone for coming out this evening and sitting with us for 3.5 hours. We do this all the time, but not everyone is enjoyable. So, yeah, I mean, you know what? A lot of what's been said, I agree with. Obviously, I think Aurora, we like to think of ourselves as good neighbors. I'm a member of Trinity Anglican. Now I don't go as often as I should, so you might not have seen me there. But when the church burned down, Trinity obviously accommodated the United Church in our worship space, and I think that was being good neighbors. And the church is looking to rebuild their worship space in a way that's sustainable, and I mean that allows them to be good neighbors to our community throughout the ministries and outreach that they have described and that their ministers have described. But I also think we have an obligation to also, and I think this is borne out by the changes made by the United Church application, to be good neighbors to the residents who live in the area as well. And I think that, as my colleagues have stated, that this is possible, and that we're very close to being able to reach an accommodation that I think most members of the congregation, most members of council, and most members of the neighboring community can, be happy with. And so I'm hopeful that, if this does move forward to general committee, that we can address some of the concerns of the residents with the massing at the rear of the structure. And so having said that, I would like to point out, though, that obviously as a council we have an obligation to fairly kind of look at every planning application that comes to us. And so, I was asking the proponent about the setbacks for the proposed new church structure. Those are some of the most substantial exceptions that they're requesting, because if you look at the old institutional zone, the front yard setback is 10 meters. The rear yard setback is 15 meters. The side yard setback, that's interior side yard, is half the height of the building and in no case less than 4.5 meters. And the exterior side yard minimum is 10. And so those are, when you start to look at that, what that would allow, even if you just decided to build something, just on the institutional property under the zoning you currently have, it would be substantially different than what we see before us. But as a council, we have the ability to look at exceptions and to grant exceptions to our zoning and to make things fit and to make things work. Again, it's been stated that so long as there's a benefit to the community. Now, I think there is a benefit to the community with what we see before us. Again, the ministries that the United Church provides, it reestablishes the United Church on Yonge in their historic location, and that's important. It gives us some seniors housing, which is also important. But I also think that, having said that, we do need to make sure that we respect the residents who live in the area, who, people purchase homes with, looking at the zoning and the official plan and thinking, okay, well, the zoning of this adjacent property is X, and the official plan talks about the future of the area, and so I'm confident that if I build or purchase a home here, that some of these expected changes may occur, and so I think we do have to respect that. Some of the things I'm looking forward to see in the report, and these are my comments for planning. I'd like to see, as we always get, is the charts. So they had 54% of the property was C2, 46% of the property is institutional, and the requested exception zone. I'd like to see the chart, the exceptions, setbacks, all that kind of stuff. I also think that it helps the residents when they're going through the reports to be able to look at everything consistently. I would like to understand the angular plane. The proponent talked about how there was multiple definitions within our own official plan and stuff, and obviously they're probably going to use the one that allows them to get the most out of it. I'd like to see a description on what the parameters around the angular plane is. There's been a little bit of discussion at the ratepayers about how stories are calculated, and I know that obviously on Yonge, it kind of the current proposal meets our sort of plans with 5+1. But obviously there's grade change back to temperance, so I'd like to know how stories are calculated. And I'd just like to close my initial comments by saying, repeating what I said at the beginning, which is that I think all of us on council are hopeful that we can move forward with this application in a way that satisfies the congregation of the United Church and the local residents, and that we can move forward. And again, Aurora's a town of good neighbors, and I think that we'd all like to continue that moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Tom, Councillor Gartner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I must say I'm very proud to be part of a council that articulates its values and the needs of our residents so beautifully. This is a very unusual planning application and one of my most difficult. Usually we have residents on one side and a developer on the other. In this case, we have residents in the neighborhood, and then we have residents who also are part of the developer's plan because they're members of the church community. And I'm a Libra. I want to please everybody. So I'm going to look at it from a planning perspective. We have an official plan, and part of that official plan is our promenade plan. And that is a vision for Yonge Street. In this case, it's the historic part of Yonge Street. And then we have the respect in our official plan for stable neighborhoods and for transition so that stable neighborhoods are protected. And for both of these, the height and the massing and the setbacks are not what's required. And I know that everybody has worked very hard to come up with a plan which is so much better. And so many of us have said, so much closer. And I thank you, and I thank the residents who have worked so hard as well. So hopefully when we come back to our general committee meeting, there will have been a little more progress made so that I can say we've been able to support the needs of all of our residents and a wonderful and contributing church community.
Thank you, Councillor Gartner. Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll start off by saying that I will be voting in support of this moving forward to a general committee meeting. I think it is the next logical step in what we've been working through at this point in time. My only other comment would be that collaboration isn't always a quick, tidy, easy thing to do. Sometimes it takes work, and sometimes there's the concessions made on all sides. So my only bit of advice, I know I've heard the planners say that they're willing to keep listening and keep having conversations and keep moving forward. So I think it's important that everybody keeps that in mind. And to remember that everybody here in this location are residents, whether you're a resident in one of the homes or you're a resident of the church. Everybody, they all want to see something positive come out of this at the end of the day. So remember that everybody's in this together, and keep working forward, keep moving forward, and keep working together. And I'm sure that by the end of it, we will have something where we're all proud of it. But the second that you stop thinking about our neighbors as neighbors, that's where we get into trouble. So that's my piece of advice, and I hope everybody keeps an open mind and willing to keep moving forward on this.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. My name doesn't come up on the list, but I'm going to take my opportunity. It's got a couple of questions from Mr. Ramuno, so rather than go back and forth, Mr. Ramuno, could you, and Councillor Tom brought it up, as have others, first of all, could you please address the angular plane? Secondly, could you please provide some clarification, and Sarah Miller did speak to this, but the plan has been peer reviewed by the planning partnership, and they've looked at actually both revisions. So if you could please address that. The planning partnership is the company that did the original Promenade plan study. And lastly, with respect to the traffic, I believe that's they've already submitted, the proponent, pardon me, has already submitted a report, and that's gone out for peer review as well. So if you can please address those three things.
Certainly, to you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to the angular plane, it's a provision in the official plan and a lot of documents that is really there to ensure that there's a proper transition between higher story developments such as a building and the adjacent low-rise ground-related single detached housing. And we do have policies in our official plan as well as in our urban design concept design guidelines that forms part of the official plan, but it is a set of guidelines and provides some illustrations. And it is clear with respect to how to calculate angular plane. And I've had discussions with both Mr. Murphy and Ms. Miller, and they are using the angular plane as it is outlined in our official plan. And where you take the angular plane from in this situation is it's projected from commencing at a 9-meter height across the street on the west side of Temperance Street, and that's how you get the angular plane to ensure that the massing in a building is stepped back. There are some other situations that are referred to in the official plan. If there is a rear lot to rear lot situation, that is not the case here because we have Temperance Street as a boundary between the United Church property and a residential across the street. So they are applying the angular plane appropriately. It has been reviewed, or the designs, the proposal, at least the original proposal that came in, the 8-9-story proposal, was sent to the planning partnership, which is a planning and design firm, as our control architect and urban design firm, and they provided comments, and in principle they were satisfied with the original submission. They had some comments. We will then now circulate the revised proposal to them, and I may add that the planning partnership were the authors, the consultants and the authors of our promenade official plan. We retained them as per council's direction, and I was here during my tenure when we commenced that official plan review back in 2009. That led to the adoption of the new secondary plan, or new official plan, and the promenade plan, and I've been around since then implementing the official plan over the past 7 years. With respect to traffic, the applicants have submitted a traffic study. Their traffic consultant is obviously supportive of development as they submitted the original proposal. We have our own staff, traffic analysts, reviewing that traffic report. We've also sent that off to a third-party traffic consultant, and they are have reviewed the original proposal, and we will send the revised proposal down for their review. And again, they've already provided some comments, and they haven't raised any issues with respect to traffic generating from the site, with respect to how the traffic will be able to get around using the local streets, Temperance, Tyler, and Yonge Street. As part of any traffic review, and I'm not an engineer, but as part of any traffic review, they do look at a broader area with respect to what the existing development patterns in the area, and any other development applications that have been approved or are under consideration by council. So that will also be reviewed by our third-party traffic analyst, and we'll provide those results of all those reviews and any technical reports as part of our future report that we bring forward to General Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ramuno. I appreciate the answer. There's an incredible amount of work that goes on in a project like this, not only from the proponent, from our staff, from consultants, from council. We get to read all these reports. Sometimes we even understand them. They get very technical. Issues like the water, second underground parking with the concrete raft, which is what Central ran into when they built theirs. Indeed, these things are issues that we do take into account, and we appreciate people raising their concerns, because that's how we move forward with what we need to do. And as a number of councillors have reiterated, we are obligated to look at these applications from a global perspective, that global being the town of Aurora. So what's best for the town of Aurora? And I've said it. I said it at the last public planning meeting. I'll say it again at this public planning meeting. I believe this is the right project in the right place at the right time, and I'm looking forward to seeing this project go forward. I think that Brian's saying I'm not loud enough. Thank you. It's the right project in the right place at the right time. I believe that I've been very impressed with the developer. And the planners who have gone and worked. That's not to say they haven't. They've given up and there's nothing more they can do. I believe they've heard us. I look forward to coming to the General Committee meeting, assuming this motion passes, with some more information and perhaps even a couple more changes. I have Councillors Abel, Humphreys, and Kim for a second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate getting some extra time. I'll try and keep it brief. This application was based on the conversion or the amendment going from our Promenade C2 to the institutional. So they came forward with a 9-story, but that has not taken effect yet. And I think that's important because, as I was saying, the agreement allows to maximize the height and the scope And of course, this is a profit-making a venture for succession, and of course that allows for the agreement with the church, which is the lease payments. And what I was trying to get at before is that this great thing that is coming forward shouldn't come off the backs of our residents that surround you. And I'm not for a minute saying that that is what you're going to do. But what I am asking is that to continue the dialogue, because I've been listening to both sides, and we're sort of at a little spot here that says, well, they're not listening, and I want that dialogue to continue. As we all say, we think we're very close. If we're going to allow the institution and that huge massing, then we should at least consider what has been brought forward, and that is the angular plane and some of those setbacks, maybe enhancing the streetscape. The awnings was a great touch, I thought, sort of giving that look. But that's sort of, we're close. So let's continue that dialogue. The best case scenario is that continues, and when this comes before General Committee, it'll be sort of like what happened in the Highland Gate, which was very, very emotional. We will have the ratepayers coming forward and saying, you know what, we now support the application. And that's the best case scenario. And we're that close. So I ask that perhaps it's just a matter of tweaking the scope and accommodating and listening to the fine tuning. It should benefit everyone. We're not quite there. So most of the concerns that were asked for Mr. Ramuno for the GC are coming forward, and those are some of the setbacks in that angular plane. Although they may be satisfactory, we are allowing for that extra, the granting of the institutional amendment to go forward at this stage. But I'm cautious that we have to be able to look at this for the benefit of everyone. And I know there's a lot going forward for the church, but again, I just ask that we continue the dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abel. I have Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And a lot of what I was going to say has been said. I won't waste anyone's time, other than just a little reminder that we did get 9,000 square feet of commercial and or whatever space, which is really significant in terms of drawing people to our downtown. So again, just a great move forward and indication that everyone's listening. So thank you very much. And again, I know this tonight is just giving direction, and we'll have a general committee meeting to make the final decision. But I am looking forward to having the heart of our downtown have that art, the church back, and it will be a huge celebration to have that beautiful building, that beautiful service for our residents in town. And again, I do really hope, and I believe there will be more triggers and changes to help with all the concerns of particularly the setbacks and the temperance. So looking forward to that, and just thank you to everyone, residents and the developers, to work together. I think Councillor Perry mentioned it. We're all neighbors in this, so let's approach it as best we can as neighbors, and I believe we'll definitely get there. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Ramuno. You talked about timelines earlier, about 4 months, and then we have the 6 months from the application first coming forward in December, so that leaves us with June. When do you suppose this would come back to General Committee?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I think we're in a position to complete a review. We do have the revised plans in from the proponent. Whether we can make the last meeting in June, it may be a little tight, but I'm confident that we be able to complete our review and have a comprehensive report ready for the July General Committee meeting.
Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Ramuno. So I guess for all stakeholders, and they'll provide a timeline with respect to the duration of dialogue and having more constructive conversation. And just one other point I wanted to make was, when we look at the 30,000 foot view and we're looking at all the stakeholders in Aurora, we've had one big stakeholder in the Aurora Chamber of Commerce come to us, many of their members as well as their president, stating, what are you doing for us? What are you doing for Yonge Street? Why are there so many for lease signs out? So we get a lot of communication about that. What are we doing? We thought, well, what are you guys doing? You're the chamber. But a lot of it comes to our tables, and part of that is we feel is being addressed by the cultural precinct plan and in conjunction with the promenade plan, and certainly when you increase the density and you create the amenities and the activities, those buildings will help enable those businesses to thrive and have newer facilities, newer businesses come in, and in the mid and long term really help local residents have more options, because people are saying, well, the Bayview area seems to be getting a lot of the focus. What are you guys doing for Yonge Street? And we feel that as more of these intensification projects come to being, then that will help the Yonge Street corridor as well.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Councillor Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just quickly, I want to just state that it seems that from all the conversation around the table, we're pretty much all in agreement that we would like to still see some minor changes come back. We want everyone to still work together before it comes back to General Committee, and where we can finally have a final application that everyone can get on board with. But I'm hearing that from all my colleagues around this table, and so with that being said, Mr. Mayor, if I could ask for a recorded vote, please.
Yep, I have no more. I support the application. I support moving forward to General Committee. Madam Clerk, recorded vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a recorded vote that the report be received and that the comments presented at the public planning meeting be addressed by Planning and Building Services in a comprehensive report outlining recommendations and options at a future General Committee meeting. Councillor Abel? Yes. Councillor Abel votes yes. Councillor Kim? Yes. Councillor Kim votes yes. Councillor Maracus? Yes. Councillor Maracus votes yes. Councillor Peary? Yes. Councillor Peary votes yes. Councillor Gartner? Yes. Councillor Gartner votes yes. Councillor Thompson? Councillor Thompson votes yes. Councillor Tom? Yes. Councillor Tom votes yes. Councillor Humphreys? Yes. Councillor Humphreys votes yes. Mayor Daw?
Yes.
Mayor Daw votes yes. That
Thank
carries.
you, Madam Clerk. So the process is that this moves to General Committee. Mr. Ramuno's department and Mr. Letman will be working on the report to General Committee. There will be anybody who wishes to be kept apprised of the situation. Linda, hold up the form again, please, if you will. Please fill one of those out so that we can make sure that you are aware. You will be notified of the next meeting, which will be a General Committee meeting here in Chambers. And then presuming if that goes forward to Council, so there'll be at least 2 more kicks at the cat, if you will, with respect to this particular application in the public. So at this point, we need, Council, we need the confirming bylaw. Councillors Tom and Humphreys, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Peary, all in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Thank you very much for coming out, and thank you for your comments.